the last thing Haiti needs is a U.S. intervention or any Western intervention. Just as we were able to govern ourselves before the intervention started, we're able to do it again. The biggest thing I think the U.S. needs to do is stay out of the politics of Haiti, because when they come in, they pillage, they create chaos.
But aren't people being like murdered in the streets right now? And
absolutely. And you know who's doing it? Hey, we don't produce guns. Those guns came from Florida, and the U.S. government is aware of it. They're allowing it to happen because what they want is Haiti has a lot of gold. And we've been told that we are one of the poorest countries. Not true. It is, again, propaganda. Haiti has a lot of gold, both sides, like so many resources. We have something called iridium, which allows us to go to space, but all of these things need to be mined. That's what wars are fighting. These wars that are fighting.
So you're saying that the United States is facilitating in order to ultimately steal its natural resources?
Absolutely. And I have proof. I don't have enough time on the call because I know everything's timely.
Yeah.
And you could look these things up. It's something they've done in the past, which they did in 1915. They did in 2004 under Aristide, when they gave Aristide the coup d'etat. Twice they gave him the coup d'etat. And they create chaos. And there's a book called Gangsters of Capitalism, talks about that, history. There's a book you sometimes mention called the Kissinger Memorandum.
Right.
And then there's another book you mentioned called Fantasy Island, with the exploitation of, with the betrayal of Puerto Rico. I think it's one of those books that you sometimes read in your, and then, there's so many evidence to show that U.S. intervention is, and if you look historically, U.S. have never gone into a country and build it right back up. It's always for U.S. interests. Whenever you hear any U.S. administration talk about it,
almost all the time,
for the people on the ground. Yeah. And last but not least, I'll say this. When they invaded Haiti, and when the intervention happened, the first Aristide, which is in 92, when he got that coup d'etat, it actually came from here. Why did they give him the coup d'etat, Aristide? Because he was saying that, first, he was asking for reparation from France. Second, he was saying that every citizen, just like, he was like the Bernie Sanders of Haiti. He wanted every Haitian to get Medicare from the government, to be taken care of, to have basic
and George Herbert
income.
Walker Bush was president.
And then the U.S. was like, how can we allow Haiti to be doing these things for his people while we here, we're not doing it? If we
this is why Reagan went after Nicaragua and when they started going left and having Social Security and Medicare for all.
Exactly. So I'll say this. Haiti is a precursor of what can happen here, because the U.S. have allowed the oligarchs of Haiti, who are natural of the U.S., to run whatever they want to do in Haiti. And if what is happening in Haiti, if U.S. need to look at that as an omen to come if we don't stop the oligarchs here, because they're the one who are creating all of these chaos. So,
okay, Mark, I've got to move along, but thank you for the crash course in Haiti. Thank you so much. In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the important threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free, and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the HartmannReport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either.
Our book club for today is Talk Radio's America by Brian Rosenwald, subtitled How an Industry Took Over a Political Party That Then Took Over the United States. This is from the introduction. August 1, 1988 marked the beginning of the long road to President Donald Trump. But even political junkies took little notice of the fateful events that unfolded that day as a failed disc jockey and former Kansas City Royals executive named Rush Hudson Limbaugh III made his national radio debut. Only a small audience tuned in. So poorly commemorated was the moment that we don't even know how many stations broadcast day one of Limbaugh's syndicated program. Limbaugh claims the show began on 56 affiliates, while other counts range from 57 and 87. From the beginning, the show was brash, entertaining, controversial, and boundary-pushing. Before Limbaugh, this sort of programming did not exist outside major cities. In 1983, there were just 59 talk radio stations nationwide, and the program on many of those stations consisted of advice shows, staged interviews, and caller-driven discussions of everything from neighborhood schools to abominable snowmen. Most talk radio programming focused on local concerns, and most of the industry's stars, such as Larry King and Jesse Raphael, had left-of-center views but rarely shared them. At the time of Limbaugh, talk radio had negligible political impact. In talk radio hotbeds such as Boston, hosts might influence local and statewide policy debates, especially on visceral issues such as seatbelt laws, but talk radio was not a partisan force, and it had no role in national politics. In fact, the wall-to-wall conservative political talk stations that dominate the AM airwaves today were impossible until 1987, thanks to a regulation called the Fairness Doctrine. That year, however, the Federal Communications Commission eliminated the policy, which required broadcasters of opinionated programming on controversial issues to offer an array of viewpoints. In this more permissive environment, Limbaugh would go on to revolutionize the radio business. In doing so, he helped unintentionally to spawn a major new political player. Within a decade, the broadcast format he inaugurated aired on more than 1,000 stations and kept millions company as they commuted, worked, and shouted back at their radios. It took just a few years before conservative talk radio began to influence national politics and public policy. That influence only grew throughout the decades as the business changed. Over the course of the 1990s and early 2000s, the number of nationally syndicated talk shows rose dramatically, and the content of talk radio programs became increasingly political and conservative. Liberal pundits and some scholars agree on the broad outlines of the story. Conservative station executives, conspiring with their Republican allies, built a format modeled on Limbaugh's program, and thousands of Limbaugh wannabes cropped up all over the country. Executives, hosts, and politicians turned talk radio into an appendage of the Republican Party, using the platform to get Republicans elected and advance the party's agenda. The success of talk radio led to the development of partisan and ideological cable news networks, and some hosts complemented their radio shows with primetime cable programs. Eventually, this content found a home in the new digital sphere, with equally strident cheerleaders proliferating on blogs and other online publications. This narrative makes sense, especially to liberals. After all, many conservative media executives and their corporate political action committees donate to Republican candidates, and most hosts champion conservative candidates and causes. But this narrative is wrong. In reality, the story of talk radio's emergence as a popular conservative format and the impact it had on American politics weaves together two, But this narrative is wrong. In reality, the story of talk radio's emergence as a popular conservative format and the impact it had on American politics weaves together two distinct, complex tales. Neither has anything to do with the conspiracy to create a media servant of the Republican Party. The first describes how talk radio spread across America, in the process saving AM radio from financial ruin. Limbaugh had no intention of affecting elections or legislation, and no inkling that he could. Nor did any of his early successors. The executives who gave these hosts a chance also had no interest in political outcomes. Hosts and their bosses were in business. They wanted to captivate listeners and make money, and they discovered, essentially by accident, that conservative political talk in the mouth of an entertaining personality achieved this. Conservative hosts had strong opinions, but their primary goal was, and still is, financial gain. And it is because they realized financial gain that more and more stations invested in their style and content while divesting from competing formats. The second story concerns talk radio's transformation after 1995 into an almost entirely conservative and doctrinaire medium that eventually spawned successors in other media, took over the Republican Party, and reshaped it in hosts' and listeners' image. Limbaugh was a great innovator, but he didn't change American media and politics all at once or on his own. In conservative talk radio's early days, hosts shared stations with liberal talkers and apolitical programs. There was not an immediate sense that conservative radio was the future either. But gradually, its success snowballed thanks to trial and error in the radio business, regulatory changes, political events, happenstance, and most importantly, listener behavior. Hosts also got a boost from marginalized conservative Republican politicians.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Hey, happy Monday. It's a brand new week. Congressman Ro Khanna will be with us in just a moment here for a national hour-long town hall meeting with your calls. If you want to get in line, 202-808-9925 is the telephone number. In the second hour of our program, Trump's Iran war fever, a deadly cure for his political collapse. What's going on in Iran without congressional authorization? Also, perpetual crisis mode. How Trump uses emergency declarations to push a radical agenda. Is it working? And also in the second hour, 1/3 of all non-Trump voters now think we live in a dictatorship. In the third hour of our program, Trump is undermining Watergate laws in a massive shift of America's ethics system, and we can't let him do it. And also in the third hour, this is why the Republicans are afraid of Trump. Little boy Massie will be fired. Donald Trump launches a super PAC devoted to taking out one Republican congressman who dared defy him. Amazing. But to start, for the entire first hour of our program here today, Congressman Ro Khanna is with us for a national town hall meeting. He represents the 17th District of California in the U.S. House of Representatives. He's vice chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, a ranking member of the House Armed Services Committee on Cyber, Innovative Technologies and Information Systems, and a member of the House Committee on Oversight and Accountability. His website is Khanna, KHANNA.house.gov. You can find him on Blue Sky and Twitter at Rep. Ro Khanna. Congressman, welcome back to the program. I'm curious your thoughts. I've seen you in the media, so I suspect I know what you're going to say, but your thoughts on Donald Trump being the first president, in my lifetime anyway, who has engaged in hostilities against another country without at least getting some sort of congressional authorization. LBJ and Kennedy with Vietnam, Bush with Iraq and Afghanistan, Clinton with Kosovo. In every case, they had some authorization or an authorization to use military force, even though Congress didn't declare war. Trump seems to just be saying, hey, I can do whatever the hell I want and screw you guys.
You're actually right. I mean, even in the Iraq War case, which was a blunder, they came to Congress. They gave Congress had authorization. Here, he didn't even notify the congressional leaders. Didn't have anything in terms of notifying allies or the UN or international bodies. You remember most famously, Colin Powell went to the UN and gave all this testimony about weapons of mass destruction. As wrong as George W. Bush's war in Iraq was, there was a process that they followed. The reality is that I think Congress since then hasn't wanted to vote because they are so afraid of taking a position here. And so the Republicans have been fine to allow Trump to do this. You know, they're claiming it was just limited strikes, but every headline on every paper is U.S. enters war with Iran. And certainly if you're Iran, you think having B-2 bombers go across your airspace and drop 30,000-pound bombs is an act of war. Now, Thomas Massie, who you mentioned in your opening, and I are introducing a war powers resolution, which would make it clear that Donald Trump can't continue the escalation without Congress's approval. And we have about 50-plus House members. I'm hoping we can get the vast majority, at least of Democrats, on board and some Republicans, so we can get a vote on this bill.
Yeah, it just seems, A, reasonable, but B, more importantly, constitutional. It's pretty remarkable. AOC has called for his impeachment as a consequence of this. Do you share that?
Well, I think we need to focus first on getting the War Powers Resolution passed, because I think we can do that with Republican votes. Now, you mentioned that Trump is the first one to do this. I mean, it's if you look at Libya strikes, I'm a huge fan of President Obama, but I'm not sure that he had authorization to strike Libya. So I think this is a broader problem. Yeah, I guess that's right. But that AUMF, I mean, that was such a stretched reading. Yeah. I guess they may try to claim the AUMF for Iran. I mean, basically, it's like anything that's ever tied to any terrorist threat to the United States. They're claiming that the 2003 AUMF applies, 2002 AUMF applies. No, I think Trump's was more brazen, but I think the problem, frankly, on this, there are other areas where Trump's unconstitutionality has just been totally unprecedented in going after threatening corporations, threatening universities. But on this, actually, the problem, in my view, is more that we have given the executive post of the Iraq War license to have these overseas wars without coming to Congress. The Yemen situation, where there was an escalation of Saudi airplanes bombing Yemen, was an example. And I think we're better off trying to reassert Congress's authority on this at first. There are a lot of impeachable things that Donald Trump has done. This is one of them. But on this issue, I would rather we focus on reclaiming Congress's war powers.
Yeah, I get it. It's a stretch to think it would ever even happen anyway. Last question, and then I'll turn you over to our callers. There seems to be a debate among Democrats over whether Trump actually is and represents a genuine threat with regard to destroying our form of government, to turning us from a kind of semi-oligarchic democratic republic into, a full-on authoritarian tyrannical dictatorship, versus, which some Democrats are embracing. I'd put Jamie Raskin probably at the top of that list. Versus, for example, Congressman Pocan on this program last Wednesday said that he thought that most of what Trump was doing were efforts to distract us from his tax cuts for billionaires and other ways, selling off public lands, sucking up to the oil industry, the ways that basically he's looting the country. What say you? Where do you fall in this spectrum?
Well, look, I think American democracy is very, very robust in terms of, are we going to have elections in 2026? Are we going to have elections in 2028? But the reality is, when you have people being deported without any due process, when you have people being beaten, some of them who are actually American citizens. There was a case of ICE agents chasing down someone and literally beating them. When you have students here being totally censored, then you have to ask yourself, okay, even if we survive 4 years of Trump, and history is written that millions of people were treated in this country's period with total lack of dignity, then millions of people were harassed, had their rights violated, had their human rights violated, then you have to ask yourself, well, what was that?
Oh, Congressman Khanna just froze up on us. Hopefully and presumably he'll come right back. Oh, there you are back. Okay, keep going.
Yeah, I said certainly, and we'll look at the Wi-Fi here. I apologize. I'm in the DCCC. It shouldn't be an issue, but certainly there are millions of people for whom the country is not democratic, who are the most vulnerable, and that is the issue.
Yeah, I get it. So let's pick up some calls here. Don in Pittsburgh, Kansas. You are on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Hi, Congressman Khanna. I find this, the fact of the matter is the United States has not declared war on another country since December 8th, 1941. One way or another, we've attacked all kinds of countries, and we don't bother with declaring war. And it's eroded as time has gone by to where now with Trump it's the most brazen thing yet. And I also agree with what Tom said. Part of this is a diversion. They're trying to rob us blind. There isn't enough money for a big tax cut unless you loot
So, Don, your question for the Congressman? Don, what's your question?
Did you hear me saying that? But does he agree? I mean, I was just saying that I sort of agreed with your statement there that this is cover for looting the country.
Okay, Congressman? Oh, the congressman is frozen again. Uh-oh. All righty. Well, let's take a break.
Recording in progress.
Recording in progress. Okay. We'll be right back. 15 minutes past the hour. It's the Thom Hartmann Program. We're trying to get Congressman Khanna back on the line with us. Stick around. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
15 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back. Stay with us. And welcome back. Congressman, are you with us yet?
Can you hear me?
I can.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know what's happening. I'm having my team come in. I'm just at the DCCC, so it should not. I don't know why the connection is not a good one.
Yeah. Well, if nothing else at the bottom of the hour, maybe we can reestablish it. I guess we just had a caller. I'm not sure. He said he was kind of agreeing with me. Let's just go to the next caller because I never got clear that he actually had a question. Joe in Cupertino, California. You are on the air with your congressman.
Good morning, Tom. Congressman, I really appreciate it. You just represent me so well. And to mimic the first caller that came in today, this is a distraction. And what happened in the last 48 hours or 72 hours, if you will, is a distraction. And this big, beautiful, or whatever it is, bill is the real prize here that you need to, as you continue to focus on being the priority, to send a message to the Cheeto in chief that he doesn't have that kind of power, that we're still a representative democracy. And that being said, I'm really concerned about, the situation in Los Angeles. I understand that the Ninth Court District was overturned, and I understand that there was, I'm not mistaken, some response from the San Francisco judge saying that, no, that's not the question. I wonder if you knew anything more than that about whether or not we can get the Gestapo off the streets. You're going to be here in San Jose, and I'm just afraid that this is going to be the status quo. If he can drop bombs in Iraq without permission from Congress, what's to say that he doesn't do something like this in the whole state of California? You have any update on information on that?
Well, I questioned Pete Hegseth, and I challenged him about the deployment of the Marines, the deployment of the National Guard. What was so scary about Hegseth's answers to me was that he refused to say that he would actually obey the district courts or the Court of Appeals. He then subsequently had to correct, because the media was so much after him, that he would at least obey the Supreme Court. But we're living in a world where you have administration officials fundamentally believing that they can defy the courts, so certainly any court up to the Supreme Court. Now, I disagreed with the Ninth Circuit opinion on the National Guard being authorized by Donald Trump, but I fundamentally believe you respect the courts in this country. I mean, and the reality is that the Ninth Circuit has ruled that they think Trump had a legitimate use of the National Guard. The problem is not just, though, that the issue of the National Guard. The problem is that what is going on in Los Angeles is people being, in some cases, arrested, in some cases detained. Some of the cases, they're American citizens, and no due process. And we have to stand for the Constitution. And that's what many of us have been calling for.
Congressman, we just have 20 seconds left. How do you expect this situation to play out in Los Angeles?
I think that Trump is overreached. I think that most Americans say we don't want the Marines and the National Guard in our states when we didn't ask for it. And regardless if he has the constitutional authority, which is a debatable question, I don't believe he does. The Ninth Circuit ruled in his favor. The point is that it was not power. And it's not like California in any way was doing something to defy the federal power or federal courts. It would be one thing if Gavin Newsom was saying, look, I'm going to tell state troopers to block ICE from coming into California and to block ICE from conducting any raids. I mean, then you could argue, okay, are we exceeding and defying federal power? There was none of that. And it was a total overreach for show.
There you go. Congressman Ro Khanna is with us for the hour. Stick around. We'll be right back with more of your calls for you. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. America is suffering from an epidemic of bullying. And one of the things we know is that culture, including bullying, flows from the top down. We've seen studies where when issues of, for example, being gay or transgender are being debated in the public, gay and transgender kids in school are more likely to be bullied. When racial issues are being discussed, people of minority races are more likely to be bullied. Well, now we've got a man who has literally built his career on being a bully, Donald Trump, as president, or was president, as candidate. And he is driving this insane bullying campaign and using it as a political weapon across the United States. And it's contagious. It's dangerous. There's an entire article about it over at HartmannReport.com titled America's New Epidemic, A Nation Overrun by Bullies. Check it out. Welcome back. Congressman Ro Khanna is with us, taking your calls for the hour. Devon in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. You're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Thanks so much. Hi, Congressman. So everyone's wondering, how can we stop this train? And along the lines of what that last caller said about stand and saw on the Bulwark this morning, a video of ICE agents beating a father of what turns out to be 3 Marines and taking him into custody. So question one, is there a way to defund ICE so that they have to stop? And question 2, what if the Senate just refused to vote on this budget and let the government shut down? Is that an option? What can we do at this point to stop this slide? And last but not least would be that executive order 14288, which Johnson seems to be intent on having voted into law, and that would then make our military part of our police force. So what's the plan, man?
Well, you brought up the horrific incident of the man, the father of the 3 Marines being beaten. We've been talking about that in the California delegation, just utter outrage. But what the remedy there is, first of all, the courts. I mean, this is a blatant violation of the Constitution. We need to make sure that there are clear guidelines in terms of the funding in September of what is impermissible, the violation of the Constitution. This is why I think we should not have capitulated in doing the continuing resolution without getting clear guarantees that agencies are not going to engage in unconstitutional action. So I believe both that we need to be aggressive in the courts. I believe we need citizens, as there were in the No King the marches, out there talking and shining a light at these abuses. And we need to make sure when we do have the budget in September that we get ironclad guarantees of guardrails against unconstitutional action.
Jan in Etna Green, Indiana. You are on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Hi, Congressman.
Hi, Jan.
The news media and pundits seem not to remember that back before 1953, Iran was a democracy. But the United States wanted oil. Most today had wanted to nationalize the oil wells, and of course, the United States didn't like that. So I don't know if Eisenhower used some kind of Unlawful War Powers Act, or if it was the CIA. Anyway, most today was eliminated through a coup, and the Shah of Iran installed as the leader. Well, we all know how that turned out. And back and up to present day here, why did Iran's bombs get through to Israel? How did they make it through the Iron Dome that tax dollars went to build, and you voted for? So I just don't see any hope for that region of the world until something is done with Israel and AIPAC. Thank you, and good day.
Well, Tom, I'm always amazed by the history knowledge of your audience. I mean, you're absolutely right. In 1953, Mossadegh was overthrown, partly because the British wanted control of the oil fields as a remnant of British colonialism, and our CIA contributed in the overthrow of Mossadegh. And then, of course, when we allowed the Shah in to get heart treatment, which President Carter did on humanitarian grounds, that led to the horrible hostage crisis and the conflict, and the countries have been in conflict ever since. But Obama tried, and he reset the relationship. And it was not just about getting nuclear energy under 5% at Natanz, which is what the JCPO did. Obama also fundamentally understood that the resetting of the Iran relationship, which is what the JCPO would set the foundation to do, would help bring peace in the region. And ripping that up is one of the foundational mistakes, just like we'll look back on the overthrow of Mossadegh as a foundational mistake that has set things back decades in terms of actually getting peace. And it's not just that we need a Democratic president. Unless we have successive Democratic presidents who understand the nuances of the world and are able to see the world as other countries see it, not only as America sees it, it's going to be hard for America to reassert our moral leadership and to work towards the peace and diplomacy that Obama was building with the JCPOA.
I never thought I'd be nostalgic for Richard Nixon. Do you think there's any chance that democracy could come to Iran again?
You know, I think there is. I think this is unfortunately making it harder. I mean, when you have the Nobel laureate, the Iranian dissident, I forget her name, but she was out there pleading with Donald Trump not to bomb. And she wants regime change. There are many people in Iran who want regime change. But I don't understand how we have not learned the lesson that when America bombs, it actually creates a rallying around effect around the very regimes that we do not like. And that anytime there's revolution, that it comes internally, not because it's externally imposed.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
So very well said. The Vice Chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, Congressman Ro Khanna, with us for the hour, taking your calls. We'll be back on the other side of this break.
Today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Separated by the Border, a birth mother, a foster mother, and a migrant child's 3,000-mile journey by Gina Thomas. This is from the introduction. How good is your Spanish? And would you be able to take in a 4-year-old girl? She's from Honduras and speaks minimal English. The social worker had texted me on a Friday afternoon. I sat at my desk, bent over my cell phone, reading and rereading the text. My thoughts traveled to Honduras, bachata, ballades, clothes hanging on the line. So many things in our lives seem to have prepared us for this moment. My son was attending a bilingual school. I'm a former ESL teacher. And my husband, Andrew, and I speak Spanish. Plus, Honduras already had a piece of my heart. As those thoughts came, I tried to push them away. The voice of logic came in loud and strong. We had just gotten into a routine with Emma, our foster daughter. 2 foster children and 2 biological children would be too much for us to handle. Our first month as foster parents taught us this, and for the sake of everyone involved, we knew it would be very unfair to try that again. A little later, the social worker called and left me a message saying, "It looks like the Office of Refugee Resettlement, the ORR, and Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, will get her on Monday in court. It'll only be the weekend. Call me back after you talk to Andrew." I asked Andrew when I got home, "We can manage 4 kids for one weekend, right?" He said he doubted it would last only a weekend, but I convinced him that if ORR and ICE were involved, they would get her on Monday. A few minutes later, I called our social worker and said that we'd do it. When I walked into the social worker's office, Julia was sitting there in a brand new bright pink Barbie t-shirt. The social worker said they'd found the t-shirt in their clothing closet and Julia wanted it. Beautiful, soft onyx curls framed the girl's umber face. Her dark complexion made me speculate she was from a coastal region. She stood in dirty flip-flops next to the social worker's chair, chit-chatting away in Spanish without a care in the world. "Julia's been talking my ear off," the social worker said. "She's so sweet, but I have no idea what she's saying." Another worker brought in a black tote bag with a few other items from the clothing closet, including a pair of sequined high-top sneakers that Julia had picked. I began to speak to Julia, pronounced Julia, in Spanish. She seemed happy to hear her mother tongue, but her body language didn't budge. I read that signal loud and clear, so I kept my distance and sat down on the floor. ¿Cómo se llama? I asked. Julia. ¿Cuántos años tienes? How old are you? 4. She looked older than 4 to me. I had been told her parents were deported and she was left behind. She was under federal jurisdiction. I would find out later this was all misinformation. I signed some papers and said, we'll see you on Monday. I asked Julia if she would come stay with me and my family for the weekend. She smiled. I told her I had 3 other kids. Her eyes expanded with excitement. On the drive home, she jolted my Spanish from its slumber. The social worker wasn't kidding about how much this little one talked. On April 6, 2018, U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions' zero-tolerance policy, in which the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Justice would partner for the sake of prosecuting illegal entry into the United States. Sessions said, quote, "If you cross this border unlawfully, then we will prosecute you. It's that simple. If you smuggle aliens across our border, then we will prosecute you. If you are smuggling a child, then we will prosecute you, and that child will be separated from you as required by law. If you don't like that, then don't smuggle children over our border." End quote. 6 weeks later, almost 2,000 children had been separated from their parents at the border since the zero-tolerance policy took effect. When Sessions announced the administration's new policy, I couldn't comprehend the cruelty. I also wondered if it explained why a preschooler was living under my roof. Julia had come to live with me and my family in February of 2018, and it felt surreal to be a part of her story. She had first been separated from her mother, Guadalupe, called by her nickname Lupe through the rest of this book, by smugglers who were paid to bring them across the border. Julia had then been separated from her stepfather, Carlos, by U.S. Customs and Border Protection, likely because what was recognized by the Honduran government as stepfather was not recognized by the U.S. government as the same, a detail I didn't understand until an immigration expert read the first draft of this book and explained it. Julia had already suffered much trauma, and separating her from her stepfather had only inflicted more. The weight of the trauma that we, as a nation, began inflicting on vulnerable children and their parents was cruel and unusual punishment. When I heard that my own country was going to begin separating children regularly from their parents as a policy, it broke me. Reality became surreal, and Andrew and I learned to live in it, separating the trauma from our emotions so that we could survive. As the veil of Oz is ever lifting from my white evangelical American eyes, what I now see is simply heartbreaking. Government-secured human rights are mostly for privileged white people. Julia is not white. Julia is undocumented. Julia's first language is Spanish. Julia is a girl. These are all labels that set her back in a society made by and for white, passport-holding, English-speaking males. But God, who is neither white nor male, despite my use of the pronoun he, shines his good news on every human being alike. The book is Separated by the Border by Gina Thomas.
Did you know that every weekday we send out an email before the show giving you all the topics coming up so you can be fully informed and ready to interact with our program? Or that after the show we send out Sue's Stack, a list of every topic I've discussed along with clickable hot links to every source of information I've shared with you on the air? It's all completely free and available over at thom.tv, thom.tv. Check it out. Welcome back. 34 minutes past the hour. Picking up your calls here for Congressman Ro Khanna, Vice Chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, who's with us for the entire hour in a National Progressive Townhall meeting. Tyrone in Harlem, New York. You are on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Thanks for taking my call, Tom, and thank you for taking the call, Ro Khanna. I'm a little befuddled right now because I'm looking at the C-SPAN, and they got an Afghanistan War Commission examining the decisions of the Obama administration. For whatever reason, I guess they forgot that there were 2 presidents after him. I don't understand this. This is smoke and mirrors. But my question was, do the Democratic Party have a deal with these people that come into the Democratic Party to be just a poison pill. You know, we had your Joe Manchins, you know, now we got Fetterman, now, and then we had other cinema. We had these people in the Democratic Party that stopped a lot of the agenda that Democratic people wanted to happen for us. And I know, Ro Khanna, you are progressive, and I understand that there's a lot of stuff that you have seen, and we don't have no protection. The Republicans get rid of their problems. You know, the people that they felt not toting the line for the Republican agenda, they get them out. So I don't know. We got to fight fire. We're fighting. We got to know that these people are with us or they're against us. And when we find out, we need to see how to deal with them.
Yeah, and and thank you, Tyrone. And I'd add to that, Congressman, I'm curious your thoughts on David Hogg, who is apparently trying to do just that in the DNC.
Let me start with David Hogg, and then I'll get to Tyrone's question. I supported David Hogg. I support primary challenges. I think primary challenges are healthy. We need a new generation, and we need more progressive challengers to many in many districts. And so I publicly supported David Hogg. Tyrone, one of the reasons that I supported Bernie Sanders in 2020 over Joe Biden is I think that Bernie would not just have pushed for things like a $15 wage. He would have fought for them and forced votes on them. He would have gone and campaigned in Arizona and West Virginia and said, look, your senator is not supporting a wage. We need to get a wage increase. And maybe he wouldn't have gotten 15, maybe he would have gotten $10. And I admire President Biden, but he was a consensus builder. He did not want to put any Democrat on the spot, either with a public vote or with campaigning against them. I just think the Democratic Party, we should not insults against each other or the politics of personal destruction or indulge in scandal, but we need to be calling people out on policy, on ideas and policies that are not in the interest of the American people. And we need to be willing to call them out in campaign. I called out Schumer all week on cable news saying, I don't know what he's thinking, not being for the War Powers Resolution. Lo and behold, on Sunday, he comes out for the War Powers Resolution. So this is the type of leadership I think the party needs.
Seth in Los Angeles, you are on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Thank you very much, Congressman. Before I ask my question, I just want to point out your statement that communication at the DCCC is wonky is the understatement of the year, although I know you didn't mean it in that particular way. I'm going to ask this question in all due respect, and I think it's a tough question, okay? I understand that you don't believe we've crossed the Rubicon yet in terms of having lost our democracy or our democracy really being in threat, that it's robust, despite military being deployed, citizens being kidnapped by masked individuals off the street, the president refusing to spend money that Congress has appropriated, DOGE shutting down departments that Congress has authorized, a bomb being dropped on a nation without congressional approval. What actual thing could Donald Trump do that for you crosses the Rubicon and you would say, oh my God, we've lost our democracy? I don't see what's left, but there must be something for you. What would cross the Rubicon?
Well, I think he has crossed the Rubicon in terms of his degradation of democracy and his degradation of human rights and his degradation of institutions, his violation of norms. But what would cross the Rubicon in terms of saying we lost our democracy is if they fundamentally rig or cancel the 2026 or 2028 elections. I think ultimately Donald Trump is going to lose the House, and I think a Democrat's going to win in 2028. And I think out of this hour of darkness, we're going to see a new progressive era. But does that mean that that it won't be the darkest blot on American history with millions of people's rights violated, with human indignities, with institutions destroyed? Absolutely not. And we need to resist that with everything we can. But we also need to be preparing, in my view, a positive agenda, because I do think we're going to win back power. Now, if he cancels elections and if or tries to fundamentally rig them, then I will be wrong. I hope that's not the case.
Congressman, apropos of that, Greg Palast, the former BBC reporter, did the math, all of it from federal sources, by the way, and found that about 4.2 million people were prevented from voting or their votes were not counted in the last election, mostly from these Republican purges that were authorized by the Supreme Court in 2018 in the Husted case, where they are now mailing postcards mostly into big cities in red states, like Cincinnati and Ohio, for example. And if you don't return the postcard, you get stripped from the voting rolls. And those postcards have about a 3% return rate because people think they're junk mail. This has been, and Pallas concluded, based on the analysis, the state-by-state analysis he did, that had they not simply done that one thing, that Kamala Harris would be president right now. And,
wow.
Yeah, and I can send you the article.
Please.
And with all the details and all the facts. So, which raises the question, since the Supreme Court said this is perfectly legal, no Democratic governor or Secretary of State has chosen to send those same postcards into heavily Republican districts in their states. And there's a bit of a debate going on this program and in other venues about whether Democrats should fight fire with fire, should do that on the assumption that it would produce such a screaming outrage from Republicans that we might be able to achieve a conversation about, and maybe even a national consensus, that this is a stupid idea that the Supreme Court inflicted on us. What say you?
Well, I would look for ways that we can raise that consensus and raise that argument without disenfranchising people, just because it's fundamentally opposed to what we believe in, to engage in any kind of disenfranchisement. And ultimately, I don't think compromising our principles in such a deep way is worth it. Though I can understand why the anger. And we've talked about this. You've been pointing this out, of purging of rolls and closing of polling places for years, Tom. And the reality is we are in a democracy with one arm tied behind our back because of these actions. But look, that has been the case for many years of 250 years of American democracy. I mean, for so many years, African Americans were denied effectively the vote because of the polling tax, because of literacy tests. Yet we persevere to make democracy more and more inclusive. And we're in a moment where there's certainly been a huge curtailment of democracy. I mean, that is unquestioned. But the question is, what is our response to it? And our response to it has to be to double down with greater passion in getting people out to the polls and showing up as people have in the No Kings March. I mean, I guess my perspective on all this comes from my grandfather in Amarnath Vidyalikar in the fight against British colonialism. And I certainly think our odds are much stronger than that, and they're stronger than what the civil rights leaders faced. And so, yes, we are under great danger, but I think citizen activism can overcome it.
There you go. David in Columbus, Ohio, you're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Hello, Congressman. The DNC recently changed leadership, and they lost David Hogue, I think, and then they also lost a couple of representatives from labor unions. Does the Democratic Party still represent a true opposition party to the Republicans? And do we need an emergency meeting to reorganize the Democrats?
We need a cutting of the House of the Democratic Party. I mean, the people who were part of the status quo need to go. First of all, I don't think anyone who chair-led for the Iraq War should be asked to opine on cable news or for the Democratic Party on what we should do about the bombing in Iran. I mean, I think you lost your credibility if you were either cheerleading for the Iraq War or opposing Obama's JCPOA, of which we have many people still in the party. I don't think we should have people who were out there cheerleading for NAFTA, cheerleading for China's ascension into the World Trade Organization, who presided over the hollowing out of this country, telling us what economic policy we need. I don't think we should have people who were calling for deregulation and went along with tax breaks for the affluent, telling us about what a working class agenda should be. We need to rebuild this party back to the FDR roots, back to a party that stands for good paying jobs at home, peace abroad, that has a working class centered philosophy. And we need to get rid of the parts of the party and the people in the party who are not on board with that.
That is brilliant. Congressman Ro Khanna, Vice Chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, representing the 17th District of California in the U.S. House, is with us for the hour, taking your calls. It's just about 45 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. You can find his website at Khanna, KHANNA.house.gov. You can tweet or blue sky him at Rep Ro Khanna, R-E-P-R-O Khanna. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
More of your calls for Congressman Ro Khanna on the other side of this. Stay with us. And welcome back, Mike in Elyria, Ohio. Hey, Mike, you're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Hello, Tom. Hello, Honorable Ro Khanna. I saw you on TV. You did a good job with Mr. Massie. So,
thank you.
Thank you for that. My question is, like, I was reading the old World Almanac, and they said when you address a congressman or a senator, you always say honorable in front of that. Does that carry any gravitas anymore, or is that just wasted speculation?
You know, if you've ever visited sort of the Capitol, you would be struck by the majesty of the most awe-inspiring buildings. And the reason that it has this majesty with portraits of George Washington and sculptures of Moses and some of the most inspiring quotes and some of the most ornate marble is that the hope was that the architecture around the Capitol would bring out the best of public debate. And the idea of the honorable was to say, well, someone representing the American people, 700,000 people, that's a very honorable thing to be the voice of the people. And if we called you honorable, maybe you'll be reminded of your duty, of the solemn obligation. Unfortunately, we've lost that sense. And people have lost any sense of wanting to have a public debate that is different than a barroom conversation. You know, one of the reasons I don't curse in public, and I've certainly cursed in private, is I do believe that there is an obligation to try to have a debate and a public conversation that's better than our lowest common denominator, and that we should try to be worthy of the title of being honorable again, because that's what the founders intended. I feel like it's a losing battle these days, but I'm hopeful that we'll have a shift in culture.
That's great. Colorado, you are on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Representative Khanna and Tom, I'd like to hear both of you talk about the reconciliation bill and the sale of public land. There's a billionaire land grab going on across the American West right now. And what we understand from the bill is that 14.3 million acres of public land in the state of Colorado alone is going to be part of this. And this land is being sold to billionaires. And they ostensibly are saying that it's for exploration, for resources, and for development. But what they're doing is building billionaire compounds across the American West. And these are actual billionaire cities. And they ruin the ecosystem, and they drive off the community that already exists there.
So your question?
My question is, what do you know about this, and how can we mobilize to stop it?
Thank you.
Well, it's one of the most offensive parts of the bill. It was put in the middle of the night. I mean, they're literally selling off public lands, public parks, land that belongs to all of us, selling it off to the private sector in Utah and Colorado. Over 10,000 acres of this land being sold. My understanding is the first time in the country that we're actually just selling off public land to private interests. I mean, we've given grants before of land to be developed, but never something that the American people own just being auctioned off. And you're right. I mean, there's some people who want to create these tech cities, which is ridiculous. It's like they want to be a secular genesis, not have a history, culture, any customs. They want algorithms and technologists to dictate the norms and private interests of cities. It is a dangerous destruction of the very idea of the public spirit, the public sphere, the politics of the common enterprise, and is one of the most problematic parts of the bill.
Our daily song is now available on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, YouTube Music, Pandora, Tidal, Deezer, iHeartRadio, and a whole bunch of other platforms. Just look for songs by Louise and Thom Hartmann. Check it out. So back in 1933, when Franklin Roosevelt became president, we were in the depths of the Great Depression. He raised the top income tax rate on billionaires from 25% to 90%. The ultra-rich were screaming, and here's what he had to say.
A number of my friends who belong in the very high upper bracket have suggested to me on several occasions of late that if I am re-elected president, they will have to move to some other nation because of high taxes here. Now, I will miss them very much.
He just took it right to them, right? Now, what came out of that was the world's largest and fastest growing and first major middle class. We can do this again. We just have to raise taxes on rich people. It's pretty straightforward. There's a whole article about it over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out. Welcome back. Congressman Ro Khanna with us, taking your calls for the hour. Susan in Caldwell, Idaho. You're on the air with Congress.
Well, thank you, Congressman, for being on the show with Tom. I'd just like to expand a little on your answer to the previous caller on the sale of public lands. This is the most egregious and obscene thing of anything to have Montana specifically exempted from the 11 states that are subject to the sale. If you look up the Wilderness Society or Field and Stream, you will see a map of everything that's possibly for sale in the BLM and the Forest Service portfolio. It's all the beautiful fields and streams in the hills. You cannot build housing for people that's affordable up in the mountains. And I'd like people to really focus on that. And I'd like to know what the House is going to do to prevent it. Mike Simpson and Ryan Zinke got the 500,000 acre proposed sale out of the House version of the big, beautiful bill. What are we going to do to stop Mike Lee? What can you do in the House? This is just a precedent-setting abomination. There are almost 250 million acres of federal land that would be subject to this law. What can we do? Once they start selling the first 2 million acres every year, they'll be back for more.
Got it, Susan.
Well, you're absolutely right to be outraged. I mean, it's not just that we love our parks and we love our lands. I mean, they're selling off our democracy. They want to privatize this country. They want this country not to be subject to democratic rulemaking, but to be in the cities established by billionaires. And it's outrageous. The House, we couldn't stop it. I'm just going to be candid. We've tried. We fought. They on a party line vote got it through. So our only hope is the Senate, and our hope is that this gets taken out of the Senate reconciliation bill. And we need to be talking to the senators who are on the fence, who are still quote unquote moderate, the Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski's, Tillis in North Carolina, who's up for re-election, to tell them that this is outrageous, that this is crossing the line. But that's our only hope in preventing this.
Charles in Creighton, Missouri. You're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Hello, Representative Ro Khanna. Thank you for taking my call, Tom. I have a question about these things I get from Representative Mark Alford. And they're obviously, to me, they're political flyers, but they say on them paid for by official funds authorized by the House of Representatives. Is that real?
You know, there's a thing called franking. We don't do it. Our office doesn't do it, but it's perfectly legal. And what you're allowed to do is spend federal money, taxpayer money, to inform your constituents about what you're doing. But this gets abused. I mean, what you're supposed to do it for is say, hey, here's the constituent services you can get. Here are the things I've been working on your behalf. Of course, there's a fine line between that and campaigning. Anything you send out has to get approved through the House committees. But these committees now, of course, have Republicans appointed on them. But that's why you're getting that mail. And there's been a lot of abuse about the House franking. But what he's doing is legal because there is that provision that we've set up.
Rich in Sedro-Woolley, Washington. You're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Congressman, you are a member of the House Oversight Committee, I understand?
I am.
That would give you that gives you oversight over the DOJ subcommittee. Could we please encourage them, and maybe everybody can join in with phone calls, encourage members of the DOJ subcommittee to start investigating waste, fraud, and abuse and Medicare Advantage?
Thank you for saying that. First of all, I'm on the oversight committee, but these days it doesn't seem to be much oversight because no one shows up. I voted to subpoena Elon Musk, and we've been trying to get DOJ to testify to no avail, so we need to take back the House. But I released, if you don't mind, Tom, I released this progressive budget that would reduce the deficit by $12 trillion. It's closer taxing the wealthy. I loved your clip about FDR that you played. It's amazing that those same arguments are there 100 years later. The rich billionaires tell me that they're going to leave the country if my tax increases go through. Maybe I can use FDR's line that I'll miss them very much. But it also has Medicare Advantage fraud. I mean, Medicare Advantage is upbilling. They're making it that patients are sicker than they are. It would save hundreds of billions of dollars, hundreds of billions, much more than any of this cutting USA. And check out our progressive budget because it has exactly that provision in there.
Yeah. Congressman, we have just 45 seconds left. I'm curious your thoughts on where we should be focusing our efforts in the next 2 weeks, and also whether you think July 17th, how that's going to work out as a second No King's Day, or I guess it's got a different brand name now.
Well, Tom, I've been meeting your listeners all across the country, and I know you're in every congressional district. As a personal request, we have this War Powers resolution. The Congressional Progressive Caucus is going to vote on it Tuesday. I'm expecting and hopeful they'll endorse it. We've got about 50 people on it, on Massie and mine. I'd love to get to over 100 sponsors on this War Powers resolution. And why it matters is because Trump is now talking about regime change. He's talking about escalation. We need to make it clear that we can't get further entrenched in an Iran war. So that's going to be my priority. If there are people and your callers know of helping to get people on this War Powers resolution, that would be very, very helpful.
Great.
And by No Kings, I'm going to be inspired again on July 17th. The silver lining to all the dark days that we have is just seeing the American people, so many people, get up and stand up for our Constitution.
Thank you, Congressman. Thanks so much for dropping by, too.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Everybody, call your Congress member and tell them to vote for this bill.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program, TV and video media online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's all. You want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox, no ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
Hi, for our book club today, we're reading from Bernie Sanders' new book, Where We Go From Here, 2 Years in the Resistance. This is from the introduction. During my campaign for president in 2016, I stated over and over again that the future of our country was dependent upon our willingness to make a political revolution. I stressed that real change never occurs from the top down. It always happens from the bottom up. No real change in American history, not the labor movement, the civil rights movement, the women's movement, the gay rights movement, the environmental movement, or any other movement for social justice has ever succeeded without grassroots activism, without millions of people engaged in the struggle for justice. That's what I said when I ran for president. That's what I believe now. That's what I've been working to accomplish over the last several years. At a time of massive and growing income and wealth inequality, as our nation moves closer and closer to an oligarchic form of society, we need an unprecedented grassroots political movement to stand up to the greed of the billionaire class and the politicians they own. And the good news is people in every region of our country are standing up and fighting back against the most dishonest and reactionary president in the history of the republic. In state after state, they're also taking on establishment politicians who are more concerned about protecting their wealthy campaign contributors than they are with the needs of the middle class and the working people they're supposed to represent. We're making progress when millions of people in every state in the country take to the streets for the Women's March in opposition to Trump's reactionary agenda. We're making progress when an unprecedented grassroots movement elects a young African American as mayor of Birmingham, Alabama. We're making progress when tens of thousands of Americans turn out at rallies and town hall meetings to successfully oppose the Republican effort to throw 32 million people off health insurance. We're making progress when governors and local officials announce in response to student demands tuition-free public colleges and universities. We're making progress when over the past 2 years, hundreds of first-time candidates of every conceivable background run for school boards, city council, state legislature, and Congress, and many of them win. The good news is that the American people are far more united than the media would like us to believe. They get it. They know that over the past 40 years, despite a huge increase in worker productivity, the middle class has continued to shrink while the very rich have become very much richer. They know that for the first time in the modern history of the United States, our kids will likely have a lower living standard than us. The bad news is that instead of going forward together, demagogues like Trump win elections by dividing us. The bad news is that too many of us are getting angry at the wrong people. I was not an immigrant picking strawberries it was not an immigrant picking strawberries at $8 an hour who destroyed the economy in 2008. It was the greed and illegal behavior of Wall Street. It was not transgender people who threw millions of workers out on the street as factories were shut down all across the country. It was profitable multinational corporations in search of cheap labor abroad. Our job, for the sake of our kids and grandchildren, is to bring our people together around a progressive agenda. Are the majority of people in our country deeply concerned about the grotesque level of income and wealth inequality that we are experiencing? You bet they are. Do they believe that our campaign finance system is corrupt and enables the rich to buy elections? Overwhelmingly, they do. Do they want to raise the minimum wage to a living wage and provide pay equity for women? Yes, they do. Do they think that the very rich and large corporations should pay more in taxes so that all of our kids can have free tuition at public universities and colleges? Yep. Do they believe that the United States should join every other major country and guarantee health care as a right? Yes, again. Do they believe climate change is real? You got to be kidding. Are they tired of the United States of America, the wealthiest country in the history of the world, falling apart at the seams with roads, bridges, water systems, wastewater plants, airports, rails, levees, and dams either failing or at risk of failing? Who isn't? Further, a majority of the American people want comprehensive immigration reform and a criminal justice system that is based on justice, not racism or mass incarceration. Today, what the American people want is not what they're getting. In fact, under Republican leadership in the House, Senate, and White House, they are getting exactly the opposite of what they want. The American people want a government that represents all of us. Instead, they're getting the interests and extremist ideology of wealthy campaign contributors. They want environmental policies that combat climate change and pollution and that will allow our kids to live on a healthy and habitable planet. Instead, they're getting executive orders and legislation that push more fossil fuel production, more greenhouse gas emissions, and more pollution. They want a foreign policy that prioritizes peacemaking. Instead, they're getting increased military spending and growing hostility to our long-term democratic allies. They want a nation in which all people are treated with dignity and respect and where we continue our decades-long struggle to end discrimination based on race, religion, gender, sexual orientation, and nation of origin. Instead, they have a president who seeks to win political support by appealing to those very deep-seated prejudices. During the last several years, I've worked hard in Washington, but I've also traveled to 32 states in every region of our country. I've seen the beauty, strength, and courage of our people. I've also seen fear and despair. I've talked to people with life-threatening illnesses in West Virginia who worry about what will happen to them or their loved ones if they lose the health insurance that keeps them alive. I've talked to young immigrants, dreamers in Arizona who are frightened to death about losing their legal status and being deported from the only country they have ever known. I talked to a young single mom in Nevada worried about how she can raise her daughter on $10.45 an hour. I talked to retirees and older workers in Kansas who are outraged that as a result of congressional legislation, they could lose up to 60% of the pensions they paid into and were promised as deferred compensation for a lifetime of hard work. Bernie Sanders, where we go from here.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome to the second hour of our program. Well, Trump has done it, and so has Iran. The headline, Iran launches missiles at U.S. bases in Qatar and Iraq. Qatar closed their airspace, period, to all travel, just a couple of hours ago. And now Iran has actually launched these missiles. We'll keep you up to date on that. Trump is meeting in the Situation Room right now. Also, Dmitry Medvedev, the vice president of, no longer, actually, he used to be. He's kind of Putin's right-hand man. He's the guy that Putin was taking turns being president with, constitutional two-term requirement. Medvedev has said that other nations, implying Russia, are more than willing to sell nuclear weapons to Iran. Trump has now gone to his Nazi-infested social media site to rant about that. But here we are. Americans are waiting for retaliation, assassination, terrorism. Are we going to have another 9/11 here in the United States? The State Department has issued a travel warning for Americans. If you're thinking of traveling anywhere in the world, look out. This is just wild stuff. There's a bunch of points that I think are really worth making around this. I wrote about them in my daily take today over at HartmannReport.com. The title of the piece is Trump's Iran War Fever, a Deadly Cure for His Political Collapse. And yeah, number one, actually my article starts out by pointing out that George W. Bush was the guy who first said it out loud and then acted on it. When you're in political trouble, start a little war. He told his biographer, Mickey Herskowitz, that if he became president, he was going to attack Iraq, because that would be the key to having a successful presidency. That would get him support. And sure enough, before 9/11, his poll ratings, his approval ratings were in the crapper totally. Increasingly, we were starting to learn. In fact, the New York Times had done that review of the ballots in Florida, and we started to learn that actually it looked like Al Gore had won the presidency. It was just handed to Trump by the Supreme Court, by 5 Republicans in the Supreme Court, 2 of whom had been appointed by his father, including Clarence Thomas. So, as I recall. So, Bush is really in a mess, just like Bush was. For Trump, its inflation is up. His tax cut bill is in trouble. The GOP war on our schools and libraries is backfiring. Women are dying and furious because of red state abortion bans. Armed thugs are kidnapping people off our streets without warrants or due process. His destruction of USAID has killed an estimated 300,000 people so far. Immigration raids are causing food to rot in the fields. Epstein files are still hidden. Nobody but billionaires wants Trump to sell off the public lands. The housing crisis is worsening. Putin's made a fool of Trump with his murderous campaign against Ukraine. To Social Security and Medicare, or Doge's cuts, that's Trump's cuts, are creating havoc for people who are just turning 65. That's 10,000 people a day trying to sign up for these programs. Musk now knows every penny you've ever earned and every drug you've ever taken. Republicans are on a national purge of voter rolls in blue cities and red states. 10 million people showed up to Trump, to protest Trump last weekend. Or the weekend before. So why not follow Bush a little war? Well, it looks like that's exactly what Trump did. However, Whenever we've gone to war in the past, Korea in 1950, Vietnam in 65, Kosovo in 99, Afghanistan and Iraq in 2001 and 2003, the president has always gone to Congress to get some sort of approval. We haven't had a declaration of war since, but we have always had at least something, this authorization to use military force. In 1974, after the Nixon abuses with regard to Vietnam, among other things, the War Powers Act was passed to explicitly say no more police actions, because the way they got around that was they said Vietnam was not a war, it was a police action. Remember that? That was, first Eisenhower, then Kennedy's, then LBJ's, and then ultimately Nixon's shtick on that. So Bibi Netanyahu has been trying to get, an American president to attack Iran ever since the 1990s. I mean, he was leaning on Bill Clinton in his first term as prime minister of Israel. So, and all of this is not to say that Iran is not, a problem. I mean, I used to travel a lot to Israel. I helped start one of what is now the largest child caring facility, for abandoned, abused, and orphaned kids in the entire country. And I have dear friends who live in Israel. And like I said, Louise and I have spent a lot of time there. And I've been when suicide bombers killed people close to us. I mean, like blocks away. And those who did by Iran, by and large. And, their death to the Jews rhetoric is really, frankly, gotten old. They oppress their own people, women have no rights, and perhaps most significantly, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has looted Iran to the tune of $95 billion. I mean, this guy is more of a kleptocrat than even Trump or Putin. But does any of that make this America's war? Does Iran actually represent a threat to the United States? Shouldn't Congress have a say in it? I mean, Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution says Congress shall have the power to declare war. Only Congress. There's not a single mention of war powers in Article 2, which is about the president. So, that's why Woodrow Wilson, FDR, Truman, Harry Truman, Jack Kennedy, Lyndon Johnson, Bill Clinton, both Bushes, all went to Congress to get approval before dropping bombs on other people. I mean, even Obama used Bush's AUMF to legitimize his attacks on Libya. Trump has no such authority, and he's not even claiming it. He didn't write a letter saying he didn't have the Office of Legal Counsel in the White House write a letter saying, here's the legal reason why we can bomb Iran. There is nothing there. Trump is essentially saying, we can bomb Iran because I said so. And this fact, this startling reality that, this is what dictators do, right? I dictate. I say this is it and that is it. This is being completely ignored or largely ignored, but it blows my mind. I mean, this is the first time in my lifetime, and perhaps I believe the first time in American history, that we've had a president commit an act of war without the approval of Congress. And by the way, Thomas Massie and Warren Davidson, two Republicans, the first from Kentucky, the second from Ohio, agreed. Massie says, while President Trump's decision may prove just, it's hard to conceive a rationale that's constitutional. Davidson said this is not constitutional. Sean Casten of Illinois, who's a Democrat, said no president has the authority to bomb another country that does not pose an imminent threat to the U.S. without the approval of Congress. I mean, there you go. So, we've got this unconstitutional seizing of more power into the White House, into the executive branch. It's also important to note that in 2015, President Obama worked out a deal with Iran, and they were honoring it. That deal did away with 97% of their enriched uranium. It went from 10,000 kilograms down to only 300 kilos of their centrifuges, capped their enrichment at 3.67%, which is the level that you use for nuclear reactors. And yes, they have a nuclear reactor. In fact, it was built by Russia. And they allowed IAEA inspectors in all their sites. But Trump tore that up, I believe, at the insistence of Benjamin Netanyahu in his first term, Trump's first term. And had Trump not torn that agreement up, we would have no reason to be bombing Iran right now because they would not be enriching uranium. But here we are. We've got 50,000 U.S. troops in the region. Apparently, there's Iranian to at least two U.S. bases, one in Qatar, one in Iraq. And to crank the fury quotient in Iran up to 11, I mean, if you really want to have the Iranian people, Ayatollah, here's how you do it. Trump is now calling for regime change, like Bush did in Iraq. It doesn't work. These things, as Congressman Khanna just pointed out, have to go organically. They have to go from the bottom up. Now, one of the pro-bombing arguments that Trump's war hawks have made is that, hey, we're supporting Ukraine against, why shouldn't we support Israel against Iran? Well, we haven't bombed Russia. It's apples and oranges. It's a completely different thing. And by the way, Russia is Iran's ally. And now you've got, like I said, Medvedev saying that, maybe we'll supply a nuclear weapon to Iran. I mean, this has supplied Putin's military with thousands of deadly drones, their Shahed drones, that have really helped them out in their war against Iran. So, could this end up as World War III? I think it's not impossible. Now, what Trump is planning on or hoping on or betting on is that, back on January 3rd, 2020, when he killed Iranian General Qasem Soleimani just outside the Baghdad airport, Iran's response was pretty mild. They lobbed some missiles into a U.S. airbase in Iraq that caused traumatic brain injury in a little over 100 U.S. soldiers as a result of the shock wave. But, that was about it. And Trump downplayed it and said, oh, there's just a few headaches. And I'm thinking that Trump is betting that history is going to repeat itself. But I'm not sure that Iran today is the same Iran that it was in 2020. And then to make things even worse, now Trump put Carrie Lake in front of Radio Free Europe or Radio Liberty Radio, and she has now gutted Radio Farda. Radio Farda is the Farsi language, that's the language they speak in Iran, is the Farsi language U.S. broadcasting service that uses giant transmitters in Qatar to speak to people in Iran. And it's now dead because Trump doesn't like pro-democracy propaganda being distributed around the world through Voice of America, if you want to call that propaganda. Now, there's also this belief that Iran has sleeper cells in the United States that could do something like 9/11. I mean, this could get really bad really fast. And Trump, I'm guessing, is also betting that if it does, that will play into his hands too. I mean, after 9/11, look at how people rallied around George W. Bush. If we get hit with another 9/11 style attack here in the United States, maybe not, airplanes hitting buildings, but something that kills thousands of Americans in a mass casualty event, are Americans going to blame Trump or are they going to blame Iran? I suspect that they will rally around Trump and blame Iran. I mean, that's just, history tells us that. So what do? Well, the National Security Powers Act. Now you've got this new piece of legislation co-sponsored by Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie. Call your member of Congress, 202-224-3121, and tell them to co-sponsor that legislation.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
18 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls in just a minute. According to Iranian state TV, they've expanded those missile launches to Bahrain and Kuwait, as well as Qatar and Iraq. Amazing. Monty in Kingman, Arizona. Hey, Monty, what's on your mind today?
Those 88-foot flagpoles?
Yeah.
I want the American people to think about this. Is there a possibility he's going to make a flag like he has the True Social with his face morphed into it, or he's going to create his own flag? That's
the guy, when he bought Mar-a-Lago, it had the family of, what was her name, Marjorie. She was the Post family, I'm forgetting her last name, but maybe it was Post. But, this wealthy family that owned Mar-a-Lago, the publisher of the Washington Post, as I recall, or the owner. And Crest there. And so Trump just kind of ripped it off. He made a couple of tiny cosmetic changes and said, now I have a family crest, even though his family has, his father was a draft dodger from Germany, or his grandfather, rather. So, it wouldn't surprise me if Trump were to try and reinvent the American flag. But so far, no signs of that, Monty. Monty, thanks for the call. Mark in Signal Hill, California. Hey, Mark, what's on your mind today?
You were talking about how they mailed out postcards to just to get rid of voters. Now, but it would be bad taste to send out in the Republican states. But it would be, we could send out postcards to the people who received the disenfranchisement things and say, "Hey, you've been dropped. Here's your."
Yeah, the problem is here's how they play the game. In many of these states, you have to register within a certain period of time, like more than 90 days before the election. So let's and I'm not sure what the law is in Ohio, but let's assume for a moment, just for the purposes of discussion, that it is 90 days. You can't, within 90 days of the election, you cannot register to vote. So what they do is they send out the postcards 100 days out. If they don't get them back by 90 days out, then they knock you off the voting rolls, and then it's too late for you to re-register.
Okay, but still, we know that they're mailing them out. You could mail them out in advance warning that they're up to this.
Yeah, and let
maybe
people
even use the congressional thing that you and Ro Khanna were talking about, where you can do it without paying for the postage.
Right, it's called franking. Yeah, that's a good idea, actually, Mark. Is sending out some sort of a newsletter or a letter or something, to inform people that you may well get a postcard, from the Secretary of State's office, and take it seriously. Even though it looks like junk mail, you actually have to return this postcard. So
yeah, that's. But if they just say that's rather than look for this postcard, because people. That's a little too much work, I think. But just say, "Hey, people are being dropped left and right in your city."
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's a great suggestion, Mark, and I'll try to remember to bring that up or share that the next time I've got a member of Congress on the program, because you're right, it's true. I'll be back with you in 60 seconds. We'll continue the conversation. Stay with us. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. They called it blood libel, what the Germans were doing against the Jews, claiming that they were using the blood of Christian children to make their matzah. We've got a new blood libel now here in the United States. J.D. Vance and Donald Trump lying through their teeth, arguing that black Haitian immigrants to the United States, legal immigrants with green cards in this little town in Ohio, are eating pets. This is another libel that goes way back. In the 1890s, people were claiming German and Dutch immigrants were eating pets. Then they claimed in the 1880s, and actually as recently as last year, a restaurant got shut down in California because of claims that they were serving pets. They weren't. It was an Asian restaurant. This is just evil stuff, these lies and spreading this kind of hate. And this is now the strategy that the Republicans are using. There's a whole article about it at HartmannReport.com, Hate as a Political Weapon. Check it out.
He stumbles through the corridors, lost in his own maze. Tweets at dawn, ignites the blaze. Promises made, but none fulfilled. Now he seeks a war to mask the guilt. Trump can't govern, so he bombs. When the polls drop, he sounds the alarms. Distractions Passion's his game, chaos his charm. Trump can govern, so he bombs. Factories closed, the jobs all gone. Blames the world, says he's the one to make us great, to right the wrongs, but all he does is drop more bombs. Trump can't govern, so he bombs. When the truth hurts, he brings the harm.
Welcome back. 25 minutes past the hour. Perpetual crisis mode. How Trump uses emergency declarations to push his radical agenda. This is mind-boggling. Multiple times now, Donald Trump has declared emergencies. He declared an energy emergency, and he used that to gut green provisions that subsidize green power and things like that, and used that to expand fossil fuel drilling and production. This is what tyrants typically do, is they use emergency powers to get around Constitution. Back in March, he invoked the Alien Enemies Act, and which has only been used 3 times before, going all the way back to 1789 or 98 when it was put into law. He did a proactive order to federalize thousands of state and national guards based on a state of emergency he declared in Los Angeles, essentially. He claimed in April that foreign trade and economic practices have created a national emergency. I mean, 2 courts have rejected that, but he's still imposing tariffs in violation of Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. And then when judges try to stop him, he goes off on angry rants against Article 3 judges. 15 Democratic attorneys general last month sued him to start his energy emergency, to stop his energy emergency declaration, which lets him override permitting rules. I mean, Jamie Raskin said it. He said, authoritarians thrive on emergencies. They love to create emergencies in order to invoke and exercise extraordinary authoritarian powers. This was the advice of fascist philosopher Carl Schmitt for dictatorship, to have the exception swallow the rule and never go back to the room. There you go. 27 minutes past the hour. I'll pick up your calls on the other side of the break. Stay with us.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Defending America from the weapons of mass deception. I'll be right back with your calls.
Today in the top, featuring The Inner Level by Richard Wilkinson and Kate Pickett. It's a new book. The subtitle is How More Equal Societies Reduce Stress, Restore Sanity, and Improve Everyone's Well-Being. This is in Chapter 6, The Misconception of Meritocracy, page 161. Boris Johnson, the former mayor of London who became Foreign Secretary in Theresa May's Conservative government in 2016, was educated at Oxford. Giving the Margaret Thatcher lecture to a think tank in 2013, he articulated the view that economic equality will never be possible because some people are simply too stupid to catch up with the rest of society. Quote, whatever you may think of the value of IQ tests, it is surely relevant to a conversation about equality that as many as 16% of our species have an IQ below 85, he said. Comparing society to a box of cornflakes, he praised inequality for creating the conditions under which the brightest triumph. Quote, the harder you shake the pack, for some cornflakes to get to the top, end quote. Inequality, quote, is essential for the spirit of envy and keeping up with the Joneses that is, like greed, a valuable spur to economic activity. Whether or not Johnson is quite as clever a cornflake as he presumably likes to think, he certainly is not in command of the facts. Nobel Prize-winning economists, as well as the OECD and IMF, have shown how inequality, far from spurring on economic growth, leads to stagnation and instability. Social mobility is reduced where income inequality is greatest, and far from inspiring innovation, it turns out that there are actually slightly more patents granted per head of population in more equal countries. And as we've seen in the previous chapters, there's also the undeniable human cost of our fixation with keeping up with the Joneses. But Boris is far from alone in his misconceptions about the relationships between inequality and ability. The idea that people are naturally endowed with differences in ability, intelligence, or talent, and that those differences then determine how far up the social ladder they reach, is a powerful popular justification for social hierarchy. The presumption is that we live in a meritocracy in which the key to status is ability. We think of society as shaped like a pyramid. The supposition is that most people are near the bottom or only a little above it because the bulk of the population lack the special talents that we imagine people need to get to the top. The belief that differences in ability are the main influence on where people end up on the social ladder is so strong that we tend to judge everyone's personal worth, ability, and intelligence by their position in society. Nor is this confined simply to how we judge others. It also affects how people see themselves. Those at the top often believe that they're there because they are naturally endowed with plenty of the right stuff, just as many of those near the bottom think that their low status reflects a lack of ability. That picture, however, is not supported by the latest scientific evidence. First, research now shows that a very major part of what happens to people and where they end up is the result of totally unpredictable influences and only to pure luck. Second, aside from luck, the most important links that exist between ability and status operate in the opposite direction of that imagined by most people. Rather than different endowments of talents determining position in the hierarchy, it's much nearer the truth to say that position in the hierarchy determines abilities, interests, and talents. But let's address luck first. Whether or not we consider ourselves successful, most of us can probably look back across our own life histories and recognize the roles that luck and chance have played in getting us to where we are. We're perhaps lucky with schools or teachers, with the questions on an important exam, with some nameless person dealing with university applications, or we got on well with an interviewer when applying for a job. Perhaps a chance meeting was important, or perhaps an opportunity for promotion came up unexpectedly. Finding a life partner is just as important for our quality of life as our career or income, but we are far happier to acknowledge that chance and luck played a key role in meeting that person than we are in acknowledging luck's role in our career. No one minds mentioning the chance meeting, the circumstances that put you both at ease with each other, or the shared interest that might easily have gone unrecognized. The role of chance makes people's lives highly unpredictable. Although there are huge social class biases in social mobility, there are at the same time vast numbers of people moving up or down the social ladder in ways that even the most detailed analysis of parenting and ability fail to predict. Similarly, although there are differences of perhaps 10 years in the average life expectancy of upper and lower social classes, that explains very little of the individual differences in how long people live. Inevitably, some rich people will die young, and some people live in poverty to a great age. And as some public health mavericks used to say, even if you exercised, ate healthy, and didn't smoke, your most likely cause of death was still heart disease. In addition to all this, there may be a large element of chance in whatever our experiences, including subjective experiences, trigger the kind of epigenetic changes affecting subsequent development that we discussed in the last chapter. Just as the development of weather systems is sometimes said it can be changed by the flapping of a butterfly's wings, so what amounts to chance events at the social or the cellular level are now thought to play a very substantial part in our lives. So much so that scientists have worried that if random chance and luck are such important determinants of whether or not an individual becomes sick, gets good exam result, or has a good marriage, it becomes difficult to understand causal pathways at all and to do anything about preventing or remedying bad outcomes. The book, The Inner Level by Wilkinson and Pickett.
Our daily song is now available on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, YouTube Music, Pandora, Tidal, Deezer, iHeartRadio, and a whole bunch of other platforms. Just look for songs by Louise and Thom Hartmann. Check it out. People in the Rust Belt states know all about the tariffs kept jobs in the Rust Belt states for centuries, literally, that America was built on tariffs. It's one of the reasons Donald Trump got elected in 2016 was because he talked about tariffs. But for some reason right now, you know, the Harris-Walz campaign, or Democrats in general, are reluctant to talk about tariffs. They call them sales taxes or something like that. they really need to be a little more straightforward, because people, particularly in the industrial Midwest, or in the Rust Belt as we call it now, are not dumb. You know, they know what's going on. They know where we've been and how we got here. And I think it's pretty important to be talking about tariffs and what they are, how they work, and how they can bring manufacturing back home. I wrote a piece about it for Hartmann Report. It's titled "Why Trump is Wrong and Alexander Hamilton Was Right About Tariffs." And I think you'll find it absolutely fascinating at hartmannreport.com. Check it out.
The radar dome is dark tonight. The screens are running blind. Storms out there, but no one's got the time. The forecasters were furloughed. The warnings came too late. Another town goes under while and seal our fate. They gutted every agency that kept us safe and sound. Called it efficiency while they burned it to the ground. No science left in sight, just chaos in its place. Mother Nature doesn't wait while fools erase the base. When tyrants rewrite the forecast, the sirens don't cry out. The maps go blank, the lines go dead, and no one hears the shout. They sell off truth for power, leave the rest of us to drown. When tyrants rewrite the forecast, the burning city is down.
Welcome back. 36 minutes past the hour. Looks like we are now at war with Iran. Iran is attacking our bases in Bahrain and in Qatar and in Kuwait. And I've seen reports that they're also attacking us in Iraq, although right now MSNBC is not reporting that. They're just limiting it to these three and playing footage of the missiles being intercepted as they come in. Wild stuff. Donald Trump has kicked the proverbial hornet's nest, and we'll see how many Americans have to pay the price for it. And there is no new intelligence, by the way, that represents, that indicates that Iran actually represents a threat to the United States. He's not even making that assertion. You know, George W. Bush at least had the respect to lie to us. So, Joe in San Antonio, Texas. Hey, Joe.
Well, Tom, I have a few points I want to bring up. I'm sure you've covered these before, but if you humor me, it shouldn't take more than 5 minutes.
Well, try to do it a lot faster than that, Joe.
What's that, sir?
I said try to do it a lot faster than that. I'll give you one or two.
Okay. I'm amazed at how people forget his boondoggles, his failures. And here's 5 that I have at the top of my mind. Number 1, the border wall. It's still going on. I understand they built something like 65 feet last year. It's there. Second is, didn't he appoint Jarrett to solve peace in the Middle East? Then he let it go, right? He put his daughter in China. She was going to smooth that over. I recall her sitting on that table there talking to the lady from
she got
Germany.
millions of dollars in patents or trademarks or whatever.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, they're going around the table. What do you do? What do you do? You know, how does a nuclear scientist? He said, "Oh, I make purses." And the other number point 4 is a 20. He said he was going to get elected. He dropped the war in Ukraine in 24 hours.
Right.
Not only that, Russia got more involved, and now they're importing North Korean soldiers and troops and techs, even more involved with it. And they're sending North Korea. Where remember the beautiful letter he had with that guy? None of that stuff is worked out.
Yeah.
Now, in my mind, the key thing here, I know you bring up Citizens United, and I will not argue that. It's a very key thing. But he also cheated us out of the Supreme Court justices, 3 of them.
Yeah,
now,
two of the 3, yeah.
And that was our hope. And then now the Insurrection Act, he wants to invoke that. When we had the insurrection that he promoted, they weren't going to invoke that then. Now he wants to, shove it in the face of California. He can't stand California. He can't stand liberals. He can't stand the actors and stuff. But what's the problem? The conclusion,
he's a pathetic, weak little man who desperately wants approval and love and adoration. And Right. If you're not with him, if you're not a sycophant, if you're not bowing down to him, if you're not kissing his ass, he hates you. That's what it comes down to.
They deify higher education. They deify critical thinking. And if you don't believe any of the stuff I just told you, that means you don't have any critical thinking, right?
Yeah, I think you mean vilify, but yeah, I totally get it. Joe, I got to move along, but thanks for the call. Well said. Josh in Kimball, Minnesota. Hey, Josh, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Well, about Trump, I think he's done more damage than any other idiotic Russian asset can do. But what I was really calling about is the 20-year veteran of the police force yesterday. I don't think you guys were communicating effectively about the mess.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was saying that, I don't think he was saying, like, local patrols and people sitting at a speed check should be wearing masks.
He was saying SWAT teams. That's specifically what he said.
When they're going in, yes, when they're going in SWAT team or, against drug cartels and stuff like that, those guys have some serious intelligence. And if they can identify you, they've got a whole network of you. So I totally understand.
If you want to go, if you want to wear a mask to take out Guzman, I would not criticize you. I get that. But if you're going to wear a mask to take out Pedro, who's working on my lawn, you're a coward.
No, I totally understand that, and I agree with that. But when you're going after a cartel or like a gang or something like that, I mean,
but that's got to be a tiny fraction of 1% of all police actions. He was defending that far more universally, and I'm sorry, I'm just these guys. In my opinion, if you feel that you have to hide who you are when you are that the taxpayers are paying for, then either A, you're doing something wrong and that you shouldn't be doing it, or B, you're a coward. And by the way, that's why the Klan wears hoods.
Right. I agree with your position, but I also agree about when they're going after.
Yeah, like I said, if you want to take out Guzman, one of these other drug lords, sure, I get it, but that's not what Trump is doing. Josh, thanks for the call. Byron in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Hey, Byron, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, Tom. I had just a comment about this big, beautiful bill. They're wanting to give tax cuts to the billionaires and corporations. The top 10% always like to say, well, we pay more than our share of taxes. We pay most of the taxes, but that's not because they're overtaxed, which is the implication. It's because the people at the bottom don't pay any taxes at all because of the earned income tax credit.
Well, it's also true that the people at the very income taxes either. Donald Trump paid $750 a year for 16 years.
Right, that as well. And also the wealthy get their wealth not from income, but from things they own, like property, stocks, and capital gains tax,
which is a lower rate.
Only when they sell it. And that's 20% is the maximum, which is a lot less than their income tax rate.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I get it.
I mean,
I get it. But the bottom line is that the upper middle class in America is taking it on the chin. If you're making more than $89,000 and less than $1 million a year, or probably, I don't make that kind of money, so I don't know, but less than say $600,000 or $700,000 a year, then you're going to be paying probably with state and local taxes probably about half your income in taxes. Whereas if you make over $1 million a year, then you can afford to get somebody involved who can figure out how to give you tax loopholes or make sure that you don't pay taxes. And
Didn't Warren Buffett say his effective tax rate was less than his own secretary?
Yeah, that was Warren Buffett. Yeah, he pointed out on multiple occasions that he pays fewer taxes as a percentage. He pays a lower income tax rate than does his secretary. You're absolutely right. Byron, thanks. That was a great point. Dave in Federal Way, Washington. Hey, Dave, what's up?
Hey, not too much. Look, you're certainly right. Trump is trying to make up for his deficiencies by distracting us. But there is more to it than this. Harry Enton, I saw him get frustrated the other day on CNN because he said the Republican Party is definitely Trump's party. He has 88% approval. Well, what Harry Hinton was getting at is this big talk of a schism, right? Like there's the Marjorie Taylor Greens that don't want war. Look, Tom, why we got to ask ourselves, why do the neocons always win? Because they're the only ones that have any information.
Well, and they
Now,
have a
we
lot
have
of money, and they have a lot of power. Marjorie Taylor Greene, by the way, deleted her post criticizing, an attack on Iran.
Well, we have them on our side, the tankies. The only difference is they are a little more worldly. They know a little bit more about what's going on. But again, look at World War I and how that led to World War II. I said the other day that I think only Bernie can solve these problems. I was like, man, anybody but Tom would say I'm arrogant. I doubt. But here's the deal. Like Friedrich Ebert, after World War I, was a social democrat. All right, but he helped set the stage for the rise of the Nazi Party. Why? Because he wanted social order. He weighed all his decisions towards social order after World War I. Yeah. World War I led to World War II. It's antiquity versus modernity. We have a problem with that, okay? And this is what we're... All right, look, I told you a long time ago that they want to put the Shah back in. The Shah is an authoritarian. Yeah. It's not going to work.
Yeah, no, I agree. Only in this case, it's his son. Or maybe his grandson. I think it's his son. And, I don't think the Iranians want a royal family any more than they want, a theocratic dictator. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Taking back the mainstream media 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, right here. I'll be right back with your calls. And welcome back. David in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Hey, David, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I just want to say thanks for your show. It's great. And I wish you're welcome. I wish there were like 1,000 more of you.
I do too. I could retire.
Exactly.
Oh, it's a joke.
But that's kind of my point, I guess. Something I'd like to ask one of the Democratic representatives when they come on is, why in the world, we have, I disagree that the Democrats don't have the funds to compete with the propaganda machine on the right. If you look, and I'll give you an example. If you look at the Democratic National Convention, they raised $540 million for Kamala Harris, okay? Mm-hmm. Now think, if all that money could have been used for media acquisition.
Oh, David, you're singing my song. I've been talking about this since 2002.
Yeah. So I think every single rep that comes on, they need to start doing this yesterday. And they go, oh, we can't afford to do that. They can't afford not to do this. Mm-hmm. Obama was the first president to win with using social media. And we need to start doing this yesterday. I mean, think you could probably buy a few hundred AM stations. The right has 1,500 stations. So, what would if you took that money and you could buy the stations? You could buy a dozen TV stations in every state. And,
I completely agree. And this is what we did with Air America, except we didn't have enough money to buy these stations, so we rented them from Clear Channel. So when Mitt Romney decided he wanted to run for president, he just bought Clear Channel and took us off the air. So, David, spot on. I completely agree. Thank you so much for saying it. Steve in Katy, Texas. Hey, Steve, what's up?
I just wanted to make a quick comment on the situation in Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. It's really been misreported. Now, even over the weekend, people are calling it a riot when there's no such thing. And nobody's saying that maybe those troublemakers are actually MAGA instigators. Not one person has even said that.
What happened in Los Angeles over the weekend? I must have missed that.
No, I mean, it's a going on thing. I mean, nothing's really happened.
You mean the ongoing protests over at the federal building?
Yeah, but I mean, the news media, technically, or whoever's still calling it a riot, or what happened
Fox
earlier
News,
was a riot.
Yeah, of course.
When it really wasn't. I mean, nobody breathed the word that when those cars were put on fire, that the MAGA people, not, you know.
Well, we know that one of those 3 cars that were lit on fire, that Fox News had a continuous be ignited by a police flashbang.
Yeah, but I just want to say one other thing real quick. Over the weekend in Tucson, Arizona, they caught a guy on his way to Los Angeles with homemade explosives that, you know, caused damage. And I've only heard that reported once, that he stopped off he's from Texas, he stopped off in big fireworks, and then he's going to make a Boston Marathon type bomb and use it in Los Angeles. So once again, they are MAGA terrorists.
Yeah. Well, most of your murders committed in the last 20 years, political murders, were done by right-wingers. I mean, it's a fact. Thanks a lot for the call, Steve. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. Our podcast, The Hartmann Report, is absolutely free and available wherever fine podcasts are available. And the entire 3-hour podcast is available over at thomhartmann.com. Commentators on pundits on TV seems to be that Iran is throwing at U.S. bases in Bahrain and Qatar and et cetera. It's very much like after, when we assassinated Soleimani, Iran notified Iraq that they were going to be throwing these missiles at us. These are big, slow missiles, and they're being easily shot out of the sky. So maybe this is no big deal. Maybe this is just face saving for, domestic consumption within Iran. I'm guessing Iran does not want to be in a war with the United States. We'll see how this plays out, but just for the moment, that seems to be where we're at. Joe in Seattle. Hey, Joe, what's on your mind today?
Good morning, Tom. Hey, I'm a little bit confused on declaration of war. I looked it up on wikipedia.org, and here's what it says. It says the last time the United States formally declared war using specific terminology on any nation was in 1942, when war was declared against Hungary, Belgrade, and Romania, because President Franklin Roosevelt thought it was improper to engage in hostile against a country without formally.
Right. This was as we were moving deeper and deeper into World War II. Yes, that's true.
Since then, we've had 70 wars without the declaration of Congress.
Yes.
So I'm confused. Is it okay for Donald Trump to do this, or isn't it?
No, it's not. And what's happened in the past is that although Congress has not issued a formal declaration of war since World War II, Congress has authorized presidents to conduct military operations in other countries in pretty much every other case except this bombing of Iran. Congress authorized, they called it a police action, but they authorized the Vietnam War several times, actually. The Gulf of Tonkin resolution was probably the most well-known one of those authorizations. Congress authorized the first Gulf War with George Herbert Walker Bush. Congress authorized the Kosovo War with Bill Clinton. Congress authorized George W. Bush's attacks on Afghanistan and Iraq with what was called the authorization to use military force, the AUMF, that Hillary Clinton famously voted for, you'll recall, in the United States Senate. And then when Barack Obama attacked Libya, he notified Congress, the Gang of Eight, and said that he was doing it under the provisions of the AUMF. So every previous president that has dropped a bomb on some other country, and I don't have the list of, you said 70, it wouldn't surprise me, but, like bombing the Houthis and things. The War Powers Act of '74 does say that the president can engage in hostile conflict in response to an attack on us. So if the Houthis throw a missile at a U.S. warship, which they did, bomb the crap out of them without even talking to Congress. So I'm guessing some of those 70 actions, probably the majority of them, fall into that category. But this time, Donald Trump did not notify Congress. He apparently did notify a couple of Republican legislators, but didn't have the decency to notify any of the Democrats. And, and so essentially what he's saying is, I don't need congressional approval. I'm the king. And, we do not have kings in this country. Joe, I got to move along, but thanks for the call. Kenyatta in Los Angeles. Hey, Kenyatta, last 2 minutes of this hour are yours. What's up?
You said something in the last hour that I want to be mildly flippant about, with all due respect. You said that I'm not sure that Iran is the same Iran that it was in 2020. Is the U.S. 60 months ago, that was 2020. We were fighting in the streets over toilet paper.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to put that out.
Good point. Good point. My point was that I think that they're probably more belligerent now than they were, but reflecting on that, I actually think I was probably.
Okay. Then I wanted to talk about an irony. Now, today or tomorrow, I forget which day, in The Hague, in the Netherlands, NATO is going to have a summit. Mm-hmm. There's no way they could have that summit without talking about what is going on in Iran with Mr. Netanyahu. But Mr. Netanyahu is wanted by the ICC, which is located in the same place.
Yep.
I'm just wondering what that dialogue is going to look like, because you see, the Rome Statute, and I'm not going to nerd out on that, which is part of the ICC kinds of terms and conditions, like the Non-Proliferation Treaty, Israel is not a signatory to. And guess who else isn't? And guess who else isn't?
The United States.
The United States.
Yeah.
The us.
Yeah.
I want to know why.
Well, my recollection is that Bush pulled us out of it because there was talk about indicting him as a war criminal, but I might be wrong. It might go back to Reagan. I'd have to look it up.
No, there was one president that actually signed on to it, and then it was withdrawn after him, and that was Bill Clinton. But let me say this, ominously. What Iran has done, the rest of the world can decide to be Korea. And the United States and Israel does not jump on people with nuclear weapons. That is an ominous fact.
Yeah, that's true. Kenyatta, thank you. And spot on. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the HartmannReport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
Today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club, we're featuring The Inner Level by Richard Wilkinson and Kate Pickett. It's a new book. The subtitle is How More Equal Societies Reduce Stress, Restore Sanity, and Improve Everyone's Well-Being. This is in Chapter 6, The Misconception of Meritocracy, page 161. Boris Johnson, the former mayor of London who became Foreign Secretary in Theresa May's Conservative government in 2016, was educated at Eton and Oxford. Giving the Margaret Thatcher lecture to a think tank in 2013, he articulated the view that economic equality will never be possible because some people are simply too stupid to catch up with the rest of society. Quote, whatever you may think of the value of IQ tests, it is surely relevant to a conversation about equality that as many as 16% of our species have an IQ below 85, he said. Comparing society to a box of cornflakes, he praised inequality for creating the conditions under which the brightest triumph. Quote, the harder you shake the pack will be for some cornflakes to get to the top, end quote. Inequality, quote, is essential for the spirit of envy and keeping up with the Joneses that is, like greed, a valuable spur to economic activity. Whether or not Johnson is quite as clever a cornflake as he presumably likes to think, he certainly is not in command of the facts. Nobel Prize-winning economists, OECD and IMF have shown how inequality, far from spurring on economic growth, leads to stagnation and instability. Social mobility is reduced where income inequality is greatest, and far from inspiring innovation, it turns out that there are actually slightly more patents granted per head of population in more equal countries. And as we've seen in the previous chapters, there's also the undeniable human cost with keeping up with the Joneses. But Boris is far from alone in his misconceptions about the relationship between inequality and ability. The idea that people are naturally endowed with differences in ability, intelligence, or talent, and that those differences then determine how far up the social ladder they reach, is a powerful popular justification for social hierarchy. The presumption is that we live in a meritocracy in which the key to status is ability. We think of society as shaped like a pyramid. The supposition is that most people are near the bottom or only a little above it because the bulk of the population lack the special talents that we imagine people need to get to the top. The belief that differences in ability are the main influence on where people end up on the social ladder is so strong that we tend to judge everyone's personal worth, ability, and intelligence by their position in society. Nor is this confined simply to how we judge others. It also affects how people see themselves. Those at the top often believe that they're there because they are naturally endowed with plenty of the right stuff, just as many of those near the bottom think that their low status reflects a lack of ability. That picture, however, is not supported by the latest scientific evidence. First, research now shows that a very major part of what happens to people and where they end up is the result of totally unpredictable influences and occurrences amounting to pure luck. Second, aside from luck, the most important links that exist between ability and status operate in the opposite direction of that imagined by most people. Rather than different endowments of talents determining position in the hierarchy, it's much nearer the truth to say that position in the hierarchy determines abilities, interests, and talents. But let's address luck first. Whether or not we consider ourselves successful, most of us can probably look back across our own life histories and recognize the roles that luck and chance have played in getting us to where we are. We're perhaps lucky with schools or teachers, with the questions on an important exam, with some nameless person dealing with university applications, or we got on well with an interviewer when applying for a job. Perhaps a chance meeting was important, or perhaps an opportunity for promotion came up unexpectedly. Finding a life partner is just as life as our career or income, but we are far happier to acknowledge that chance and luck played a key role in meeting that person than we are in acknowledging luck's role in our career. No one minds mentioning the chance meeting, the circumstances that put you both at ease with each other, or the shared interest that might easily have gone unrecognized. The role of chance makes people's lives highly unpredictable. Although there are huge social class biases and social mobility, there are at the same time vast numbers of people moving up or down the social ladder in ways that even the most detailed analysis of parenting and ability fail to predict. Similarly, although there are differences of perhaps 10 years in the average life expectancy of upper and lower social classes, that explains very little of the individual differences in how long people live. Inevitably, some rich people will die young, and some people live in poverty to a great age. And as some public health mavericks used to say, even if you exercised, ate healthy, and didn't smoke, your most likely cause of death was still heart disease. In addition to all this, there may be a large element of chance in whatever our experiences, including subjective experiences, trigger the kind of epigenetic changes affecting subsequent development that we discussed in the last chapter. Just as the development of weather systems is sometimes said to be so chaotic it can be changed by the flapping of a butterfly's wings, so what amounts to chance events at the social or the cellular level are now thought to play a very substantial part in our lives. So much so that scientists have worried that if random chance and luck are such important determinants of whether or not an individual becomes sick, gets good exam results, or has a good marriage, it becomes difficult to understand causal pathways at all and to do anything about preventing or remedying bad outcomes. The book, The Inner Level by Wilkinson and Pickett.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome to the third hour of our program. A new YouGov poll This is fascinating. Now, this was taken June 16th through the 18th, so that would have been what, about roughly a week ago. And it shows that a significant and ever-increasing percentage of Americans think that the United States is already a dictatorship. Now, I've been warning about this since Reagan, really. But in a big way since the Patriot Act and all that kind of stuff in the early 2000s. But 24% of people, that's a quarter of Americans in this, or almost a quarter in this YouGov poll, said, quote, the U.S. is a dictatorship. They agreed with that. And if you exclude Republicans or Trump voters, a third of Americans believe that. 35% with independents, it was 30%, so only 7% of Trump voters think we're in a dictatorship, and they're probably quite happy about it. Back in February, now keep in mind, this survey was done last week, so this is June, this is in the summer. Back in February, in the winter, February 3rd through the 6th, they asked a couple thousand people the same question, and at that time, instead of a third of Americans, or a quarter of Americans, 24% of Americans, it was only 18% of Americans thought we were in a dictatorship. So are Americans waking up? Maybe. Sure, kind of looks that way, doesn't it? Meanwhile, Donald Trump undermines Watergate laws. This is a really big story, actually, and I don't think it's getting anywhere near enough coverage. It's in the Washington Post, and the headline is Trump undermines massive shift of ethics system. And, you know, you'll recall Richard Nixon was just insanely corrupt. He was taking bribes while he was vice president of the United States in the White House. He was Eisenhower's vice president, if you're not old enough to remember or never looked it up. So Nixon was vice president from 1952 to 1961. And he took a $500,000 cash bribe to drop the Sun Valley land deal prosecution against him, which Nixon did. He had it dropped. Jack Kennedy reinstated it, and that began a series of dominoes that led to Kennedy's assassination, but that's a whole other story. And he took a bribe from the milk lobby, or reportedly took a bribe from the milk lobby, and God only knows what other bribes he took. And his vice president, Spiro Agnew, had been taking bribes for decades. So here you had an incredibly corrupt president, and as the dimensions of his, and you know, he was trying also to get around Congress constantly, trying to assert, you know, as he told David Frost famously, if the president says it or does it, it is not against the law. It's not a crime. So Congress responded to this. Congress said, no, we're going to put some guardrails around the presidency. So, for example, in 1976, Nixon was driven out of office in 74. In 76, Congress passed a law saying that the director of the FBI has the job for 10 years. That way he can't, he can't be fired. He doesn't, this way he wouldn't respond to political pressure. Well, Trump has gone through two FBI directors. He's forced out two different FBI directors. The Impoundment Control Act of 1974 says that if Congress appropriates money, you have to spend it. But Trump has blown that up. He killed off USAID. That was 100% money appropriated by Congress. He's shut down multiple agencies. He's gutting their budgets. And he's doing it all in defiance of the law. In 1978, Congress passed a law, inspectors general for, I think it was 22 different federal agencies. And Trump fired, 18 of them, as I recall? Yeah, it just says fired many of them. I think it was 18. These are the people who are supposed to look for waste, fraud, and abuse. I mean, that's literally their job description. They're supposed to look for wrongdoing within their own agencies. It's sort of like, you watch the cop shows and there's internal affairs is here and all the police are like, oh my God, I'm going to be in trouble. I need my union rep. It's because, internal affairs looks into people doing things wrong. Well, so do inspectors general. Trump fires them. Why? So that his corrupt cronies that he's put in charge of these various agencies can participate in the looting of America on behalf of America's billionaire oligarchs and the industries that made them rich, particularly the fossil fuel industry. DOJ has gotten around the rules on government secrecy and personal data. The Supreme Court just ruled that they can take all of our Social Security information. If they have your Medicare or Medicaid information, it's now in the hands of Elon Musk, presumably. Musk knows, how much every penny you've made in your entire life. That data is in the Social Security database. If you've been on Medicare or Medicaid, he knows every pharmaceutical you've ever been prescribed, every medical condition you've ever had. There might be some things in there that could be used against you. It could be embarrassing. Who knows? Richard Benveniste, who was the special counsel, the Watergate special counsel back in the Nixon times, he headed the special counsel's Watergate task force. He said, and I quote, "The excesses of Watergate now seem naive. They've been overtaken by a system that's based on quid pro quo." In other words, Trump is running a nakedly corrupt administration. And, it's fairly obvious. Harrison Fields, the spokesman for the White House, said, "President Trump is restoring the integrity of the executive branch." Yeah, gag me with a spoon. I mean, that's just... And now this, by the way, the way that dictators keep people in line, typically, is they know that a rifle shot is more effective than buckshot, right, or than a machine gun fire. If you can selectively take out just a couple of people in different industries and in different jobs, you can successfully intimidate pretty much everybody else in those industries and jobs. So you arrest a mayor, Ras Baraka, the mayor of New York, New Jersey. You arrest a member of Congress. We've got a member of the House of Representatives, forgive me, I'm not recalling her name, who has been arrested. You have a judge or a state judge in Wisconsin, as I recall, maybe Minnesota, who was arrested. You have a member of the United States Senate, Alex Padilla, who was wrestled to the ground and handcuffed. You have students at Columbia University. You have Harvard University itself being made an example of. So all you have to do is just, you don't have to spend if Trump went after every university in America, everybody who had protested Netanyahu's policies in Gaza, or if Trump went after everybody who had attacked him, or anybody who was standing up to him, he'd have to spend an enormous amount of time and effort. So instead what he does is you pick these individuals, turn them into high-profile examples. The lawyer, the American lawyer who was flying back from Paris and got stopped at the airport and interrogated for hours and hours. The Australian guy who was stopped at the airport in Los Angeles and was interrogated for hours and then deported back or sent back to Australia. You pick some people and make examples of them. And so now Donald Trump is doing this with his own party. Thomas Massie, and nobody questions Thomas Massie's right-wing credentials. I mean, this is a guy who every Christmas posts on social media a picture of himself, his wife, and their 4 boys, every single one of them holding an AR-15 in front of a Christmas tree. Right? This guy is as hardcore right-wing MAGA as you can get. But he actually has some principles. I realize it's hard to understand, but there are some Republicans who still have principles, and one of the principles that he believes is that you should follow the Constitution, at least when it comes to war powers. And so he tweeted constitutional, what Trump is doing. It might be right, it might be the right thing to do, but he didn't ask Congress for permission. And so Trump now, in response to this, has created a super PAC that is going to be run by Chris LaCivita. Chris LaCivita, of course, is the guy who supervised the swift boating of John Kerry, if my recollection is correct. It's called the Kentucky MAGA. It's a super PAC, and that Chris LaCivita is going to run. He says he will spend whatever it takes to take down Thomas Massie, to primary him, to cause him to lose his seat in Kentucky. And like Marjorie Taylor Greene, for example, I posted a tweet earlier in the week in which she basically said, attacking Iran, bombing Iran would be a stupid move and Trump shouldn't do it. She just deleted the tweet. Why? Because she wants to say it's a good gig, Lifetime health insurance, lifetime pension, $200,000 a year, almost. I think it's $180,000 now. Good pay, lots of perks. You get to go on, trips all around the world paid for by the taxpayer. So, who wants to blow that, right? So here we are. We've got Donald Trump now trying to make an example of Thomas Massie. And Thomas Massie, by the way, with Congressman Ro Khanna, sponsored this legislation that we all need to be calling our, particularly Republican, but all of our members of Congress and saying, please co-sponsor this legislation that will require a war powers resolution before Trump can bomb another country. So what say you to all of this? It's just about 17 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with your calls in just a moment.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's the place where smart people get their news. I'll be right back with your thoughts. And welcome back. Owen in Pasadena. Hey, Owen, what's on your mind today?
Okay, a couple of things. When you mentioned, something, I definitely think we should primary Democrats who, this is the fight of our life for freedom.
Yeah, I agree. Oh, and if you could pick your phone up and put the microphone near your mouth, you can keep it on speaker if you want, but you need to get your mouth closer to the microphone so people can hear what you're saying.
Okay, I'm sorry. Did you hear that part?
I did.
Okay. Now, the reason I called in is I think we can all, quote unquote, silently protest with clothing. Personally, I hate to, buy anything on Amazon, but I did look through, and there's called The Evolution of Man. Have you seen that on Amazon T-shirt, where the evolution of man, and then the guy in the front says, "Go back, we fucked up," because there's a picture.
Oh, and I'm sorry, we can't use that kind of language on the air. I've got to drop you. I realize you weren't. But my apologies. Let's see here. Diane in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Hey, Diane, what's on your mind today?
As we know, Putin and Trump kind of go way back. Mm-hmm. And I don't think they have any kind of a bromance. I think that Putin bailed out Trump, else would take a chance on him financially. And now it's payback time. America and Russia have been arch enemies for decades, and I think Trump has been sent on a mission per Putin to tear down America, piece by piece by piece. And Trump could care less because he hates America for not bailing him out when he needed it financially. And I think that Putin is giving Trump step by step by step by step how to do it, because there are people in Russia that probably know our Constitution as well as we do, that are assigned to, And so, and this, when Trump decided to bomb Iran, Putin didn't say a word. And I think that was okay to go ahead and do it. And Putin's smart enough to know that the Straits of Hormuz is, that's a linchpin as far as getting oil out. And Iran said that they threatened they were going to close it down.
Right, but if they do, that actually helps Russia.
Yeah, well, that's the point. Everything either helps Russia or Trump in this.
Yeah,
and
I agree with your analysis.
Mission is to tear down America.
I completely agree with that analysis.
And then there goes Ukraine getting hit again.
Yeah. There was a horrible attack on them last night.
What can we do besides Lindsey Graham's sanctions that seem to have just disappeared?
Yeah. Oh, Lindsey Graham's going to wimp out. Every Republican's going to wimp out. If they want to keep their office for another term, none of them want to be Liz Cheney or Adam Kinzinger, or now apparently Thomas Massie.
It doesn't matter what Putin's oil is. If they're sanctioned and secondary sanctioned, it doesn't matter. How do we get that to go through, or something like it that will work?
Yeah.
What is the solution? Think about it, Tom.
It's going to take some Republicans finding some courage and some belief in the Constitution. So, which I'm not optimistic for, Diane. Diane, thank you for the call. There have to be some Republicans who are willing to say, I will sacrifice my political career for my country. So far, no takers. Our daily song is now available on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, YouTube Music, Pandora, Tidal, Deezer, iHeartRadio, and a whole bunch. Just look for songs by Louise and Thom Hartmann. Check it out.
It doesn't come with boots at dawn, no coup beneath a blood-red sky. It slips in through the courtrooms while no one dares to ask why. No tanks roll down the main street, no fire in the sky above, just silence from the leaders as they strangle all we love. Democracy doesn't die in darkness, it chokes beneath the sun. While cameras roll and headlines scroll, the damage still gets done. It's not the bombs that break it, but laws designed to bend. And if we wait to see the fire, we'll miss how it all ends.
Welcome back. 23 minutes past the hour. NBC is reporting that Iran reached out to Qatar and informed them in advance that they were going to be throwing missiles at the U.S. Air Force Base. Qatar, of course, informed us. And so there have been no casualties, and so far all the missiles have been intercepted. It increasingly appears that Iran is throwing these missiles as a performance for the domestic audience, so that they can say, we fought back, and to do any damage. We'll see. We'll see how this plays out. But so far, so good. It looks like a backing down in a face-saving way. But, all of that is subject to change at any moment. So stay tuned. Dave in Buffalo, New York. Hey, Dave, what's on your mind today?
Thanks, Tom. The next Democratic president, I'd like them to declare climate emergency and put a solar on every rooftop and a battery backup in every home.
I agree.
And I was wondering, a long time ago, you had a caller call in, and they talked about how Iran's policies, topics, government aligned better with America's versus Saudi Arabia, and that choice that was made when we chose Saudi versus Iran moving forward. Why did we do that? What was the point? And then, if you could just prescribe moving forward, what would have our future looked like if we would have chosen Iran versus Saudi from 9/11?
Well, we did. We buttered up Saudi Arabia early on in the 20th century when oil was discovered there, and they started pumping it like crazy. And I believe it was Franklin Roosevelt's administration that did, although it might have been Teddy, it was one of the Roosevelt administrations that first established our relationship with with Saudi Arabia. Our relationship with Iran was fairly strong. Iran had a democracy. They had democratically elected this guy named Mossadegh, and decided that he was going to nationalize the oil. Most of the oil in Iran at that time was owned by British Petroleum. And so the Brits, with our help, the help of our CIA, organized in 1953 a coup to overthrow Mr. Mossadegh and replace him with the Shah, Reza Pahlavi. And the Shah, of course, was our guy, but he was also a dictator. And then the Shah got overturned during the last year of Jimmy Carter's presidency, and that was when the Ayatollahs took over, and we ended up with a theocracy. By the way, I completely agree with your take on solar power. Last August, Louise and I had solar panels and batteries installed at our home by Green Ridge Solar, which is a great little solar company here in Portland, locally owned. And they've just worked great. I got my electric bill last month. Typically, we have an all-electric house, and so our electric bills run from $200 to $500 a month. My electric bill last month was $14. But yeah, I'm with you, Dave. Everybody should have that, and we took advantage of, I think it was a 30% tax credit and all that kind of stuff. So it's good stuff. And had we, the big opportunity that we lost, in my opinion, was during the first Trump administration, when he really took a meat axe to green energy programs. And of course, he's doing it again. Biden put them back into place. Obama's green energy programs. Trump has stripped them out. But we could be producing electricity for free. Similarly, Iran doesn't need nuclear power. They need solar panels. I'll be back with more of your calls right after this.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
It's the place where despair is not an option. I'll be right back with you. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Criminology on Trump by Greg Barak. This is from the introduction. Criminology on Trump is about family business, habitual lawlessness, and the struggle for economic and political power. The central character, Donald Trump, is a con artist, a master gaslighter, and a shrewd racketeer. It is the story of how the Houdini of white-collar crime and the founder and CEO of the Trump Organization operated a criminal enterprise, incorporated organization in 1980 and continuing up to and from within the bowels of the White House for 4 years. At the same time, it's the history of the causation of the social, psychological, and physical harms connected to the Donald and his associates before, during, and after the presidency. This book is also an account of the activities that Donald Trump pursued in order to obtain the power of Commander-in-Chief of the United States, what he then did with that power of the bully pulpit once he achieved it, and finally, the lengths to which he would go to keep from losing that power. Lastly, this is the story of what many elected did or did not do to acquire or to forfeit their individual shares of Trumpian power. This overall analysis of the underside of the rule of law begs the question, had the Donald not become the 45th president of the United States, would he, his children, have found themselves formal defendants and legal adversaries of the people of the state of New York? My answer unequivocally would have been no way. As of January 6, 2022, the question remains open as to whether Donald Trump, as the former president, or any of his family members will ever be indicted and prosecuted for criminal tax fraud and the other felonies, along with the Trump Organization, Inc., and its CFO, Alan Weisselberg. From the point of view of newsmaking, lawlessness, and equal justice, much of the popular discourse surrounding Trump has to do with competing narratives. The most reverberating of these has been the dueling apocalyptic narratives traversing both old and new media platforms alike. One narrative has to do with witch hunts, hoaxes, fake news, global elites, and the deep state engaging in a myriad of underworld and otherworld conspiracies to bring down Trump. The other narrative has to do with saving the U.S. democracy from authoritarianism, recovering law and order from the damage, chaos, and trauma of Trump, and restoring American normalcy without all of that political insanity. While these two narratives capture the cultural conflict, the diverse groups of people at work here and the rival social movements of incompatible interests, desires, and visions, neither speaks to the fundamental structural conditions that generate the divisiveness between these two narratives. Without ever addressing these structural relationships, the two sides will remain at loggerheads for some time to come. The medium is always, as always, is still the message. And so far in the 21st century, social media is the medium. At the same time, the weaponizing of racism, misogyny, hate, fear, intimidation, and violence vis-a-vis social media is neither new nor unique to the United States. These socio-cultural expressions of the contradictions of patriarchy and capitalism have been around since the nation's inception. Today's Proud Boys are the contemporary versions of New England churchmen in the 1700s, the Klan riders of the 1800s, or the fervent followers of Joseph McCarthy in the 1950s. Likewise, the anti-critical race theory politicians of today that do the bidding for white minority rule and racial discrimination are very much the same as John C. Calhoun fronting for the rich plantation owners during the antebellum South. The primary differences between the not-so-distant past of the last 75 years and the present have to do with the disbursements of the accumulation of capital. From post-World War II until around 1974, we experienced close to 3 decades of unparalleled upward social mobility, as well as a rapidly expanding middle class. However, since the mid-1970s to 2022, there's been a steady increase in economic inequality, a shrinking middle class, and downward social mobility for many. Thus, the contemporary bipartisan erosion of the liberal capitalist consensus in the United States is not the primary cause of our present democratic crisis, but it is rather symptomatic of a much broader problem that neither the Republicans, as a whole, nor most of the Democrats are willing to accept. The book, continuing, I'm referring to the inability of our bourgeois democratic system to resolve the contradictions of a political economy that promises the American dream to one and all and yet caters to the richest 1% and provides suitably for the upper 10%. In other words, our country's present-day conflicts over identity politics, government failures, neoliberal policies, right-wing intransigencies, and climate change not only predate Donald Trump and Trumpism, but they are all fundamentally driven by the unrelenting and expanding political economy of structural inequality. What makes this Trump book different from the others is that it is the only one grounded in the scientific study of crime and social control. Criminology focuses on the pathology of harmful acts and the cultural construction of both crime and punishment. The book is Criminology on Trump by Greg expert in criminology. Help support Progressive Radio. If you're listening to us on a commercial station, call their advertisers and let them know you're listening. If you're listening to us on Pacifica, or one of our many nonprofit stations, please support them when they do their fundraising drives. Thanks for supporting Progressive Talk Radio and tag You're It.
80 years gone since the last World War. We said, never again, but look what's in store. The rich got their cuts, the poor got ignored. Now the wolves are back and they're scratching the door. Is the Second Republican Great Depression knocking at America's door? Tariffs and lies with the truth in recession, and greed like we've never seen before. Is this the crash they've been waiting for? Is the Second Great Depression at our door?
35 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Picking up Mike in Gainesville, Virginia. Hey, Mike, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Yeah, I just want to talk a little bit about the how Netanyahu achieved his 30-year goal of getting the United States into a war with Iran. He finally found a president he could totally
Yeah, he finally got a sucker. Clinton turned him down, Bush turned him down, Obama turned him down.
Right. Yeah,
Biden turned him down.
Yeah, because the only thing he had to do was praise Trump. He didn't even have to block Israel was going to use it.
Well, what I'm seeing, Mike, is that it wasn't just Putin, that it was also the Murdoch family, that Trump has been watching Fox News, and Fox News has been filled with praise for the brilliance of Israel's Iran strategy, and Trump's seen, hey, somebody, Netanyahu is being treated like a hero here on Fox News. I want to be treated like a hero.
Right. Sure. Absolutely. That played a major role. But I want to be clear. Iran's not suicidal. They were not going to launch a nuclear attack against Israel if they got a nuclear bomb.
Of course.
They would have to get 10 nuclear bombs in order to just get one through. So they had a 10% probability of killing 2 million Israelis. Israel had a 100% probability of killing 30 million Iranians.
Yep.
So they were just trying to get a nuclear weapon to try to restore the balance by taking
now that assumes
out
that they were even trying to get a nucler weapon. Now, I'll stipulate that, but according to them and according to our intelligence services,
I know. They were, but when you get that close, in 2003 they killed their program because it crashed. And it came up with an alternative of using IEDs and explosive foreign penetrators to go after the U.S. So I would be much more concerned about any response in Iraq than this performative response that they just gave across the Gulf, especially since they only targeted U.S. Bases, which if you only target military bases, it totally simplifies the missile defense equation.
Yeah.
You have a very narrow footprint you do have to defend. So I'd be concerned much more about that than anything else. I would continue to look at Iraq. Now on our attack against the corridor, I was somewhat surprised that they used a 3-hole attempt. Basically, that's not what we recommended 10 years ago. But because the biggest hole should be the one that's closest to the surface, and then the other two, I don't know if they got in the underground. There's dirt on the outside, but did we hit those tunnels?
Right.
Which was what we.
Well, the other thing we don't know is if they'd already moved all the enriched uranium out of there, which they're saying.
Right. Well, I mean, yeah. But the main thing to get, but I know they didn't collapse the main hall. Where interviews you were, because you would have a great big depression on top of the mountain, because you would have had it,
you would have seen the cave in, you
would have saw.
No, reports out that when Trump said we totally destroyed their, they're annihilated or whatever the word was, that once again Trump was BSing us. I mean, we've all come to expect this from Trump, that anytime he goes before the cameras, you can expect that at least some of what comes out of his mouth is going to be lies, and the rest is going to be exaggerations and self-serving BS. But the fact that Hegseth and Vance and Rubio all went along is really it's such a tragic thing. Mike, thanks for the call. Spot on. Brian in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Hey, Brian, what's on your mind today?
Hey, good morning. I wanted to point out how unstable that entire region's become. I mean, Syria just collapsed. Lebanon's been a basket case for decades. The Israelis bomb other countries at will.
Yeah.
Nobody stops them. And, this whole thing is going to be very, very expensive. And I'm sure, late summer, there's going to be some aid package put together for Israel where they need $100 billion all of a sudden. And, of course, all the Republicans will trip over themselves to give it to them. And, I just think that there's a big problem on the left of the Democratic Party. We need a prominent Jewish politician like Josh Shapiro or Jay Pritzker or Rahm Emanuel. Someone needs to take Israel head on. The Israeli right is pulling all the strings and leading us down the garden path. And we're going to be on the hook and have to pay all the bills for it. And it's ridiculous, and nobody calls them out. I mean,
well, the one very prominent Jewish politician in the United States who is explicitly calling out Israel and Netanyahu is Bernie Sanders.
Right. But he's seen as a fringe candidate. He's an independent. He's not really a Democrat.
Yeah.
But, where's Chuck Schumer? Leading Jew from New York, most powerful Jewish politician in America. What's he talking about today?
Yeah. No,
Nothing, right?
I get it. Chuck Schumer
He's keeping his mouth shut.
Yeah, he's a good backroom dealer.
He doesn't want to anger the Jewish vote. But, it's ridiculous how they just get away with everything. What they're doing in Gaza is a war crime. And everybody in America should know that, as well as what they're doing in the West Bank.
Yeah, I agree. And Netanyahu has been indicted for it.
There's no doubt about it.
In the International Criminal Court, he's been indicted for it. All good questions, Brian. Thank you very much. Mary in Dover, what's on your mind today?
Hi. I just wanted to say that I think the Democratic Party is foolish for not fighting the Republican suppression of voters on their terms. They've changed the rules of the game, and if we don't fight on their terms, we'll never win. I think not only do we need to send out postcards, but I think we should gerrymander every blue state and that we can, and reduce the number of red seats in the House, and let them fight against their own dirty tricks.
I agree with you, Mary. I've been saying this for a long, long time. I completely agree with you. The unfortunate reality is I cannot get any Democratic member of Congress to agree with you and me.
It's crazy.
I know.
The rules are changed by the rules.
I know. I'm with you. If the NFL changed the rules and said, hey, it's okay to grab people's face guards now, and only one team said, oh, we're going to do that,
Exactly.
Yeah. Mary, I got to move along, but thank you. Spot on. Thank you so much. Stephen in Pueblo, Colorado. Hey, Stephen, what's on your mind today?
Tom, how are you doing?
I'm fine. What's on your mind?
Okay, I got a new book for you.
Okay.
It's called The Science of Revenge by James Kimmel Jr. I was driving around listening to my local KRCC radio station, as I always do.
KTRC.
And there was an interview. Pardon?
KTRC, right?
I think it's KRCC.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're in Colorado. Anyway. I was thinking of Santa Fe, New Mexico. My apologies. So, anyhow, back to you.
That's all good. Anyway, they had an interview on there with the author, James Kimmel Jr. And the book called The Science of Revenge could actually be called The Science of Forgiveness. Because what he's saying is that if you want to make America great again, learn how to and practice forgiveness.
Yeah.
And I thought, hey, he would be a great guest on Thom Hartmann.
Well, thank you. I think forgiveness is one of the single most powerful psychological healing tools or emotional healing tools that's available to us. And some people are unwilling to employ it, to forgive others. And, all of us have been wronged by different people, and being able to forgive people, particularly quickly, so you don't just drag this crap around, is very important. Stephen, thanks for the heads up on that. Ed in Chicago. Hey, Ed, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Yeah, I'm having a really hard time forgiving the Democratic Party for not using things that the Supreme Court has said are legal now, as Mary just talked about.
Yeah.
But what I'm calling you about is I saw on Democratic Underground, somebody posted the Onion's New York Times editorial.
Yeah, I saw that. And then the first response was, this has got to be a satire, right?
It's brilliant. I would love for a Democratic member of the House and a Democratic member of the Senate to read it on the floor of the House and the Senate. And if people have not seen that, it should be everywhere. It's devastatingly brilliant.
Yeah.
And so I haven't heard anybody talking about that. I didn't throw in my 2 cents on that. And I really suggest everybody read that and get and point it out to their congressional members.
Yeah,
it's brilliant.
You're talking about the one. During a briefing in front of reporters, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt announced that President Trump was the sole recipient of the 2025 Nobel, N-O-B-L-E, Peaceability and Peace. Is that the one you're talking about?
No, this one is published on June 20th.
Oh, okay.
And it actually took out a full-page ad in the New York Times.
Huh.
And it's an editorial, and they publish it in the New York Times. The title is "Congress, Now More Than Ever, Our Nation Needs Your Cowardice." And then they just check it out.
I got it. Yeah, I will do that.
It's worth your time.
Ed, thank you very much. Thanks for the call. It's 45 minutes past the hour. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, talk media for the sane among us. We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stay with us.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Speaking the truth, Donald Trump really rather you didn't know all about. I'll be right back with you. And welcome back, Rick in St. Cloud. Rick, you're listening to Sirius XM. Let me put you on hold because we're in a commercial there. And I'll pick up Eileen in Springfield, Massachusetts, and then we'll get back to Rick. Hey, Eileen, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, hi, Tom. Earlier you were talking about British Petroleum, and you were raising a question out loud as to whether or not it was FDR or Teddy Roosevelt.
Yeah, did you look it up, or do you know?
I have done extensive study on that whole situation, so I can fill in a couple of the holes you had there, if that's okay. Okay. Now, it was a very, very young Winston Churchill back around 1913 who stood before Parliament and said, we must convert the entire British Navy over from coal to oil. We must. Because he knew that Germany was getting ready for a war.
Yeah.
And he also knew that their Navy was not up to snuff. But they didn't really have a good oil supply. But so what they did was a 51% plus share of the entire petroleum company that was fledgling company running the oil industry, the fledgling oil industry in Iran. And they named it the Anglo-Persian Oil Company. It remained under the name Anglo-Persian Oil Company until the Shah was assassinated in the 1950s, and it was changed to British Petroleum. Now, there's a couple of details I also want to include in that. There's an outstanding documentary I can point you toward called Blood. 5 movies out there called Blood and Oil. I'm talking about the documentary from 2008, 2008 documentary, Blood and Oil. YouTube, it's kicking around in there. The opening 3 minutes of that movie is mind-blowing as far as the raw, beautifully well-documented data, including a newsreel footage of FDR on the deck of an American battleship in 1945, just a few months before FDR passed away, signing. We don't know. The narrator of the film says we're not sure what the meeting was about, but most historians agree it was an agreement between FDR and the King of Arabia, the King Saud of the House Saud, signing some kind of a contract that nobody has any record of, that we, the United States, will protect the royal family at all costs, ad infinitum, for generations to come, if you give us exclusive rights to develop the oil in Arabia.
Right, and that led to the Saudi Arabian American.
Right, Saudi Aramco, and I actually used to work with Saudi Aramco years ago. But the Iranian thing, the oil in Iran is at this time considered, quote, the last great prize, close quote, in the global oil industry. It is the last oil field that has 5 beautiful characteristics virtually don't exist anywhere
Eileen, your phone is breaking up really badly right now. I don't know if there's anything you can do about that. No, I can't. It's gone. You just kind of fell apart. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to drop you, Eileen, because I just can't hear you. But yeah, it's sweet crude. There's a lot of it, and the same with Saudi oil. Here we've got you've got the coals, the tar sands oil from Canada, and you've got the heavy high sulfur coal or oil rather coming out of Venezuela, and then of course we've got sweet crude, to West Texas and all that kind of thing. But yeah, and thank you. Thanks for the information you shared with us. I'm sorry we couldn't finish the conversation. Look forward to future ones. It's 10 minutes before the hour. I'll be right back with you. Stick around. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. A lot of people wonder, where did this whole right-wing movement to basically gut our freedoms and end DEI and all this other, where did this all begin? It all started back in 1951 with a book called The Conservative Mind, From Burke to Eliot by Russell Kirk. And he argued that if the middle class ever got too big, you'd see young people and women and racial minorities all get up on their hind feet and start protesting and basically screwing up America. And in the 50s, even Republicans thought he was nuts. But then the 60s happened and all those protests, and suddenly Republicans thought, yeah, he's right. We've got to destroy the middle class, or at least cut it back. And that was Reagan's mandate when he came into office in 1981. An article about this, you can read all the details. It's titled The GOP's 60-Year Conspiracy to Kill Our Democracy. None dare call it treason, but I will. Over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
Trump's on Truth Social foaming at the keys, saying protect Elon all his EVs. He called the J6 boys patriots divine, but Kia Cybertruck and you're doing hard time. They're terrorists, y'all.
Welcome back. 52 minutes after the hour. I like that song, but we're out of time here. Rick in St. Cloud, Minnesota. Hey, Rick, what's up?
Well, I look at as a situation as a whole, we deal in symptoms. The church, the 10 Commandments are just a symptom of the 7 deadly sins.
Sure.
I mean, you understand what I'm saying there.
I do.
So they don't want to get into that because, I think their bottom line is too much with money and they don't want to speak truth to power. And you go to our medical system. Well, they deal. If they were to deal with the true health problem, instead of busy making money, it comes down to our environment and the chemicals in our food is the reason. And then, hey, if you want to take it, that there's the money there, connect it with the money, just like our politics. We can't even speak truth to power because our media is too busy making money. It's not about telling us anything. That's why they deregulated the Fairness Act. And these are all symptoms.
So what do you propose we do about it, Rick?
Well, people have to be informed that dealing with these symptoms, it all comes down to greed. Greed is what's ruining our planet. Greed is what, money, greed. And people got to start realizing it ain't about Democrat and Republican. It's about
I think we as a society, Rick, need to start agreeing that greed is one of the 7 deadly sins, that it is a psychopathology, that it is harmful, not just to society, but to the individuals who have it. And we need to be pointing to some of these billionaires and saying, yeah, you guys are sick. Rick, thank you. Greg in McAllen, Texas. Hey, Greg, what's on your mind today?
Well, Tom, thank you for having me on the air. Once again, great show.
Thank you.
I had a couple of questions for you, Tom. You know, the mega Republicans, I know they put that word in front of it, but maybe it's a polite way of saying that they're communists, you know, to a certain way. It might sound extreme. There's a polite way of saying that they're communists. And, you know, when I got
Wait a minute. Are you saying, Greg, that MAGA Republicans are communists?
Well, in a certain form they are, because they don't, that's how communists are, because when they tell the truth, they don't like it, you know?
Oh, you mean they're employing the strategies and techniques of communist dictatorships, not that they're following the dictates of Karl Marx or anything like that.
Well, you know,
Engels.
when they took Alex Padilla, I thought I was in another country.
Yeah. Let's use the word authoritarian or fascist rather than communist, because you know, communism has become a political system, but it's mostly an economic system. But I get what you're saying, Greg. I absolutely get what you're saying, and I'd like to hear more people call them out for it. Thank you very much. You know, I think you make a very good point. AJ in La Mesa, California. Hey, AJ, what's up?
Happy Monday, Tom.
Back at you, AJ.
It's 71 years since one of the most famous questions was asked in a public hearing, and that was Army McCarthy hearing.
Have you at long last? No. Yes.
Exactly. Have you no sense of decency, sir? At long last.
Yep.
Have you left no sense of decency? Joseph N. Welch to Senator Joseph McCarthy. That was Army McCarthy hearings. And, of course, now as then, the answer to that question for what is defiling the Oval Office and nation, as well as virtually every Republican office holder across the land, is a resounding, unequivocal, and absolute no.
Yes. They have no self-respect. They have no integrity. They have no decency left.
Yes,
so you said this is the 71st anniversary? Was this day, this week, this month?
Well, it was June 9th, 1954, so it's 71 years and, 2.5 weeks.
Yeah. Huh. Well, thanks for the reminder, AJ. That was a good one. And good on you for remembering the quote or having the quote exact. Hey, thanks so much for being with us today. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same. Don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires, that includes you. So get out there, get active, tag, you're it. Have a great afternoon. Be good to yourself and the folks around you. Stay safe. And I will catch up with you here tomorrow. In the meantime, have a good one.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.